Come on Zoom, right?
Yes, so Susan, can we go? Do we have enough to get started? I feel like good. We have one online.
John?
You can barely hear anything.
Well, hey.
I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'll stand for a pledge of allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go ahead and start with a roll call. Board Chairperson Paul Charnetsky.
Suzanne Allen, present.
Ken Jones, present. Sonny Colbrook, present.
Martin Etchart, present.
Andrew Frazier, present.
Chuck Emmerich, present.
Do we have anybody remote? Okay, thank you.
Who is that?
Susan.
Susan Fick. On the minutes, as we know, the minutes are being recorded and are available on YouTube. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
Motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
Second. Colbrook.
Any discussion?
I would just like to point out, so I have listened to the minutes online, for the meetings that I've missed. It's not entirely clear what everybody says all the time, so you have to fill in the gaps. But just to put it out there that it is not a complete recording, there are gaps, but that, that is kind of technology.
Yeah,
We need to speak into the mic.
we do, and I understand this room is, the mic pickup is better in this room here. And yes, when we're over there, we're going to be a little bit more prudent to make sure everybody's on mic. Okay, thank you for doing that.
Mr. Chair, while we're talking about that and taking the role and things, do we qualify under the current boards and commissions, like if you miss more than X number of meetings, you're out? So we need to say that the people who aren't here are excused and get that in the minutes so that they don't have an unexcused absence. Otherwise, people are going to start getting kicked off the committee, I think. Is that true? I mean,
That is correct.
Okay.
That's in your rules and procedures.
Okay,
So maybe we just say the names of the people who aren't here but are excused, they've contacted whomever.
Mike Faith has contacted me and told me that he would not be here.
I've not heard from Lisa Bernard Watson, from Will Felix, A. Romack, or Ann Shasta Claire, or Robert Zabadick.
So would that be considered unexcused? I hate to see people get kicked off the committee and not know it.
Typically, it would be considered unexcused. If they don't inform me that they're not available, that's...
We'll give them a couple more minutes to make it, and then we'll make note of who's been unexcused on that. Right now, Mike Faith is excused.
And then at the prior meeting, we didn't go through that, and yet the chairman said, I've heard from the folks who aren't here, so I assume let's just assume those are all excused.
Excused, yes.
Okay.
We still have any other discussion? We still have a motion on the floor.
Will Felix just joined Zoom.
Okay, so Will is in. Good, thank you. Will, can you state your name, roll call? Will?
His audio has not.
Okay, that's fine. So we have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second, and any further discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes to approve the minutes. The next item on the agenda is to continue discussion of the drafting of the proposed charter. We've had two sessions where we've gone from the start to beginning. We did receive late today a copy of some of the additions that we've made or that have been made and some of the discussions that we've gone through. I understand not everybody's had a chance to go through that. We will have it available here to go through in just a few minutes. At the tail of the last meeting, there were two new topics that were not on the preliminary charter that we had discussed, and I'd like to talk about those today and get some input in from the city as well as legal in terms of how we can get those incorporated, or if we can, in fact, incorporate those into our charter. And the first one has to do with the La Loma land property that was donated to the city of Litchfield through the Litchfield at that time. So Will is live here now. Okay. Will, can you just state your name that you're present?
Will Felice?
Okay, thank you. So we had discussions, there were two topics that came up. One had to do with the land up in La Loma, and there was some concern that maybe we need to somehow incorporate this into the charter so that that land would stay in, could not be sold, or the usage of that land could not be changed, and that way we would be at least able to protect that. So that was some preliminary discussion. We hadn't put any wording. We were going to see if we can get some input from legal and city on that in terms of what we could and couldn't do. And so I'd like to kind of move forward on that. The second one has to do with water and water discussion, and we'll move into that after we get some comments on the La Loma land.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Freeholders, good to see you guys. So as far as the Loma property, of course, this came down from the Davis family. It's been in cities for a long time now. Of course, set up this property around there. So it's currently zoned agritourism zoning. What that means is there could be some businesses there, but for example, there could be a restaurant there, but it can only be a restaurant that sold agricultural products from that area. Like, for example, a farm to fork type of restaurant. Obviously, there couldn't be a McDonald's there or something like that. There could be a Walmart there. You may know that we've been working on the potential lease with Sun Health on this property for several years now to make this into a park/green space where there could be private events there, that sort of thing. They've been working on that for a long time. And actually, Sun Health asked us to put in their first right of refusal, which I refuse to do. I think it's a bad idea. And what I would say on this issue, if you want to put some protections in there, if it was me, I would say that, one, that the city could never sell the property, and two, that it be required to stay zoned as it is today, which is agritourism zoning. Of course, the charter is open to amendments. The future group could change in the future if they wanted to, but that would require a charter amendment to do that. So if you want to put some protections in there on that property, that is what I would do.
What did you just say would require a charter amendment?
If you put that wording in there, that
Oh,
if you're going to never change, it would require a charter amendment to rezone it. So that way the city could never sell it or never rezone it again unless there was a charter amendment. Everything in the charter is under amendment in the future process.
What other zoning options do we have besides agribusiness that would fit kind of the current vision for what that's supposed to be? Are we limited to strictly agribusiness?
I mean, you could make it more restricted if you wanted to, but you'd have to rezone it to do that, because right now it's agritourism. You could make it such as, for example, open space, which is like parks.
But we could limit where it could go.
Just where you could.
So we could say it's
Cannot be
agribusiness,
changed.
but it can't be anything beyond this.
That's correct. You could do that.
So you could limit the scope of what it could be rezoned as.
That's correct.
I would just maybe caution you that one of the problems that has stood between us and refurbishing the hill and getting it into the shape where it can be used regularly by residents is the cost to maintain it. It's, we spent more than $100,000 just to do a basic little cleanup, and it still needs more. And once we get it fully cleaned up, we expect that it's gonna cost $100,000 to $200,000 a year to maintain it. And probably a good $1 million to really refurbish the bandstands and the terraces, make it into something that people would really enjoy. So what that means is that the city is gonna have to have, we already have restrictions on the ability of the city to use it, which is in the gifting document that gave it to the city. So our uses now are limited to things which will support its historic preservation. So we can do certain economic activities, generate funds, so long as we keep those funds dedicated to making the hilltop, preserving and maintaining the hilltop. So it has been very difficult to find a partner, even like Sun Health, to find, what can we do up there that's consistent with it being like a park, but will still generate enough income so that it can actually be a park without costing the city a lot of money out of its pocket. We've negotiated with 2 or 3 different groups to do this. So I would urge you not to do any restrictive language in the charter beyond retain the property, don't sell the property, and live up to the gifting documents, basically.
Before we move forward, I'd like to complete the roll call. The members that just came in, could you just state your name?
Robert Downey.
Ann Schultz, Claire.
Gabriel Mack.
Will Felice.
Again.
Still live?
You're not live, you're not on phone. All right, thank you, sorry about that. So it's possible for us then to put in the charter, we could say city cannot sell the property, that it's limited to the zoning that it currently is, and then it has to abide by the gifted rules of the property?
It would be best if you would simply say, retain the property and abide by the gifting documents.
Do we have
Abide by the intention of the gifting documents.
did we bring copies of what the deed says the restrictions are?
No, we don't, if you can, I can pull them up here.
If you could just read those to us. And then, do we have a map are we talking about just the house portion?
It's 25 acres around the house.
Around the house?
25 acres.
So the
western-
corner.
The western boundary is essentially where the terrace is in.
Mhm.
Eastern boundary is Litchfield Road. Southern boundary is, 100 yards maybe from the house, and northern boundary is about 100 yards from the house.
And then the corner of that parcel is owned by Sun Health?
Health.
Okay, so there's a little historic preservation building there now, isn't there?
Well, there's, Aunt Mary's house is there.
Which is owned by the city or Sun Health?
Sun Health.
Okay, so are we leasing it, or are they just letting us?
We have a lease arrangement just so that the Historic Society can be in there.
Well, that's been very helpful, your insight on this. But we're talking about the house and the surrounding areas, and we're talking about zoning that restricts it, and there are deed restrictions. And that's the kind of information that I wanted, just because I wanted to know if folks here wanted to further protect it and protect the legacy of Paul W. Litchfield. So if you could tell us what the deed restrictions say.
It may not be an easy question for him to answer, because there's a variety of documents, that are part of this, it's part of the gift. So, he may be able to pull it up, but he also, it may be something we need to bring you, we could just bring you to the.
I have a quick question. So you mentioned that you were in talks, or the city was in talks with 3 different companies to,
Different groups. to
Okay.
do
so are you
activities up there.
Are you kind of saying that to put language in there that limits the zoning ability could potentially affect your discussions with these 3 groups? Is that kind of why you're
Future
hesitant?
discussions with any groups, between the city and any, we may or may not be successful with Sun Health.
Mhm.
That we'll see. Sun Health is, there's a natural reason for Sun Health to want to do something with that hill, because of the development they're trying to do on the 330 acres, and because of what they think they can do on the corner. All of it ties together, and so if the hill's not part of what they're doing, then there's from an economic standpoint, Sun Health is a big driver to want to get something done. Without that, if that doesn't work, and it may not, Sun Health's not the easiest group to deal with, quite frankly. If it doesn't work out, then we need to be able to look for other uses or other groups to partner with to do something. And it's a hard economic, from an economic standpoint, it's hard to justify the investments that are needed up there to make it into something that may be viable until maybe some more of the Sun Health development gets built out, and or the city center gets built. So we have more traffic and more support for economic activity on the hill, using the bandstands and terraces, and using it as an event center type venue.
So maybe it is best if you bring, I think that's what we want to see is what are the current restrictions? And if we don't know what the deed restrictions are, then we can't really comment on what we might want to do further. And the reason I brought this up, Mayor, is
Yeah, and I don't remember where the restrictions are. I mean, there was a whole gifting process that went through when the city was given the property. And we have, I have used paragraphs from those documents in discussing what we could do with the family. Because it's the family that really is the one that would step in and say, no, we're not happy with what you're doing. So that paragraph is relatively, I can find that, I'm sure, easily. But I don't know about the whole packet. So the good idea for us is to research.
So that's what we were looking at, is whether or not we want to do anything to protect the legacy. And the example I gave was Papago. I mean, you could look at North Scottsdale, where they have a North Scottsdale Preserve, and they put really severe restrictions because they don't want it to be developed at all. They want people to be able to go out there and hike and enjoy the desert. And the Papago area was deeded from the President of the United States to the city of Tempe, and it said you can only be used for municipal and recreational uses. That's it. And yet, items ended up on the agenda where people were coming in and proposing hotels with golf courses, but the city would maintain ownership of the land, and therefore it would be municipal and recreational. And none of the residents wanted to see a hotel up in the Papago Mountains. They wanted to retain its beauty. So I just don't want to see the Paul W. Litchfield Memorial Walmart, because that's what it'll take to preserve the land.
The restrictions on the gifts would not allow that. The concept that has been discussed with the family and
I think
that
the family has a lot to do with it.
They won't be here forever. I mean, at some point, it's our land, and it's not, the current council has done what all the past councils have done, which is to try to protect and preserve. We're talking about what you put in the charter to preserve that legacy forever.
And what concept that's in the gifting documents and the concept that has been discussed with the family is to use the property in a way that's similar to what Paul Litchfield used it as, which is an event center. His house was down on Florence, I think. That house was used for people coming in from out of town, out of state, all over the world, stayed in that house. And then he used the bandstand and the terraces for a variety of events that attracted people across Phoenix. So like the Philharmonic Orchestra performed up on the bandstand. They had sunrise prayer service and breakfast on the terraces. They had teas on the terraces.
The Pope visited the terrace.
Right. So it was all about events that were good for the community and that he used as part of what he was doing. And so the concept with that has been to try to use it in that same way. To make it a park, so during the time when it's not an event center, it's a park. But it's used for events that generate income that can pay the nut to keep it, really nice.
So whatever staff comes back with and says, this is what the deed restrictions are, and this is language we might recommend to maintain that legacy, whatever you suggest, I mean, I'd just like to hear it.
Yeah.
And then have that put into the charter.
Not everybody will always be as reasonable as the current council. We hope they are, but you just don't, you don't know.
We'll be glad to find those documents and send them out to you.
And then if we could actually have that looked at with legal, and maybe you guys could put together a short brief sentence that says the land cannot be sold, and then we have to abide by the gift, see how you would like that to read within the
We have
charter.
some of the most reasonable and gifted attorneys you've ever seen.
Okay, thank you very much. And so maybe we can have something on that, do you think, by Thursday? Yeah, and sent out before that? Great.
By the way, Mayor, I mentioned to the director of the Heritage Center, and she mentioned to the president of the board up there that we might be discussing this, just so I didn't want to bring it up and have them hear, hey, what are they doing talking about that? So they won't be surprised if you talk to them.
That's good.
The other issue that was brought up had to do with water and water rights, and there was some confusion. One, we do not have a water facility here. We get water from Liberty. And there was some discussion that our land that we have available to develop, do we need to have something in there that states that they have to comply with the 100-year water certificate, and can that be imposed if it's not our company? Were the main issues? So is the city have anything to say on that first?
Mr. Chairman, there's several things here. So I've ran cities before that normally have full utilities. This city is very unique in one that our police and fire are contracted, but also in that we have no utilities here. As your chairman said, Liberty, of course, does provide our water and sewer. And because of that, we have very little control of what Liberty does or does not do. Rather, Liberty is answerable to the ACC, which is the Arizona Corporation Commission. That's why we've been working on water pressure issues we've had, trying to get ACC to change that standard. That's a bigger conversation. But we have very little control of what Liberty does. So we don't have our own water supply, we don't have our own water utilities, just some of the things that we don't have. I think it's important to understand that. But there was also the question, I think it was, Mr. Jones that asked about that, about the 100-year water supply. And what I would tell you is, one, just in Matthew's opinion, none of us knows what will be here in 100 years. And two, I think that could severely cap us, because that would be putting a limit on what can be built here. But also, it's something we can control our own development, as we can say what does and what does not get built in the city. But also, though, you're putting a cap on Liberty that would be very hard to enforce, because we don't control Liberty, if that makes sense. I understand the idea of it. But like, for example, our own project right here, I don't know if you could even say for our own project that we'd have a 100-year water supply here. I don't know if we would even meet that standard, just to be honest. Same thing with Sun Health with the Loma project. I certainly understand the intention, but I don't know that we could meet that standard. What do you think on those lines?
Well, it really is Liberty that has to deal with the question of whether they can meet the 100-year water supply standard, and that's something that's enforced through the ACC to some extent, and then the state water department. I don't know exactly where the water department fits, but there's a state department that oversees that. We don't really have any developments going on, or that will ever go on inside Litchfield Park that would be impacted by that 100-year water certificate, because it's mainly for new developments where you're going to go and build huge subdivisions, and huge subdivisions that include a lot of houses and retail, and you got new residents coming in, and so you've got to show that you've got water for those residents. We don't really have that situation here, so it's an issue that I don't think you need to worry about.
Well, I just want to say one thing to that. This whole idea is about conservation and preservation for future generations. So I definitely want to go down that road, just so that we can say we have explored all of these things when we put this charter forth. And so I think that, we would be remiss if we didn't consider all of these things. I know that we have an expert here at the table that can chime in with some further. Andrew, would you be willing to, talk to us about your knowledge of water in Arizona and how, we're situated in Litchfield Park?
Sure, I certainly may be the expert in the room, but I'm not the expert on water.
You're an expert in my book.
But, if anybody's interested in a career that's going to go on forever, being a water lawyer is a pretty good job in the state of Arizona. We've been litigating it for 60 to 100 years. So, the city of Litchfield does not have its own water supply. The water supply in and around Litchfield is owned both by Liberty as well as the golf course. The Wigwam owns and controls a number of wells associated with Goodyear Farms. So the water you see on the golf course is not Liberty water, it is Wigwam water. It comes from their wells. So, in terms of water supply, who has the water? It's Liberty and Wigwam. Liberty is not a designated water provider who has an assured water supply. So neither is EPCOR to the north of us. There are a number of cities. This is a list as of 2020. In the Phoenix AMA, there's roughly 15 cities, and then 7 private water providers that have designated 100-year water supplies by ADWR, Arizona Department of Water Resources. What people define as a 100-year water supply is either you have a renewable surface water supply, of which there are very few in Arizona, or there is basically a groundwater model in which they say that they look at all the wells in the area. When you apply for a certificate of 100-year water supply, they look at your demands, they look at all current demands, and then all proposed demands that are already out there, and they're looking to see if the groundwater, the water in the underground aquifers, would supply basically all planned development for the next 100 years without going past a 1,000-foot threshold. So dropping the water table from currently Liberty, I think, says our static water table in Litchfield Park is roughly 190 feet. So the water supply would have to drop to 1,000 feet, and that's what we're projecting out 100 years. I would echo what Matt said. If you believe in a 100-year model, I think some models are good, but most are predicated on assumptions that we cannot control. Water is a very complex, system. I don't think that the model can project 100 years with any kind of accuracy. That's my personal opinion, but it's better than nothing. We are looking to conserve water in Arizona. It's a good way to do it, but models get tweaked, assumptions get tweaked, which is why last summer it came out that we didn't have enough water in the Phoenix AMA. We're 4% short over 100 years, which is going to curtail some current, planned development in Buckeye, Queen Creek, but that was just because they changed the model. The model before said we had plenty of water, and then they changed the model, they updated the model, they refined their assumptions, and then all of a sudden we don't have enough. I think we have plenty of water in Arizona. I don't think Litchfield really has an issue, looking at what type of development we could have, on the remaining ground that is City of Litchfield. Don, you're right, we're landlocked, we can't add more ground. And we are kind of, at Liberty's, they are our municipal provider and they are governed by the ACC. So I don't think we have an issue. The other thing, Kenny, I listened to the meeting, you'd mentioned, well, what if we require it? Because at the state level, there's talk of getting rid of it. If at the state level they get rid of it, they're going to tell ADWR you can't build your models. If ADWR can't build their models, there is no one here at the city. There are very, very few consulting firms statewide or nationally that could do that type of modeling. There's no way that we as a city could say, yeah, you have a guaranteed 100-year water supply, because the data that's required is immense. You have to look at every well, everything that's drawn out of basically this entire area. It wouldn't be feasible. We can certainly put in restrictions that would protect types of uses. We could write in something into the charter that during periods of water stress or, drought, that there's requirements to pursue xeriscaping or other things where we're not using as much water, but a requirement where you're asking a state to validate, or the city to validate a model that doesn't exist or turn to a model that is no longer made anymore, it's not feasible.
The charter's really not a good spot for things like requiring xeriscapes if there's a drought. I'm trying to define what the heck that even is. I mean, the charter really needs to be above that. Wouldn't be a bad thing maybe if you had a goal that said that we want our citizens to be responsible in the way they use water. And the council should consider that in formulating the ordinances that, that apply to us. But, I mean, the 100-year supply, even if you could figure out that Liberty didn't have a 100-year supply, you said you made the decision, council decides based on city staff and all, we've hired all these experts, Liberty does not have a 100-year supply. Then what? Okay, we don't have a little authority, we have no authority over Liberty. It's, so there is no step if you were even to figure out whether you had it or not. I mean,
It's really good to know all of this information, I think, so that, we're better informed.
Well, so the reason I asked the question, and I appreciate all this information, I went and read some more on it and learned some of the same things you're saying today. But the reason that there's a requirement for an ADWR certificate for a 100-year water supply is to protect the water resource, right? We don't want you developing, and what I read, and you know more about this than I do, is developments with greater or equal to 6 lots must have a 100-year water certificate if they're within one of the 5 active management areas. So that's what happened in Buckeye. They wanted to do a big development. Buckeye said, you have to have a 100-year water supply certificate because you're going to have more than 6 lots and you're in one of the 5 active management areas, so you need to have that. And they didn't have it, and they said, well, we're going to let you start the process and they gave them something they thought they could, which is a temporary ability to build, and then they find out they can't get the certificate, and they're required to have the certificate, or they can't build, is what my understanding. I mean, that's what I read today again. If you're in one of the 5 active management areas, the AMAs, and you have greater than or equal to 6 lots, you have to have that certificate. And what they said was, there is not enough water. So the question is, should you continue to build knowing that they've already identified a shortage of water that won't support that development? So all I'm saying is that's how the 100-year requirement came to be. Phoenix has one, right? They have somewhere within Phoenix, they have a requirement that you develop, you get the certificate. And the other reason I brought this up was, there was a development going to go on in the East Valley, and the Senate president happened to be from that city, and they could not get the certificate, and he said, let's just take that out of revised statutes. Let's do away with that requirement. So in other words, we know we're not going to have enough water, so let's just eliminate the check that says we don't have enough water. That way we can use all the water as fast as we can and not have any water for the future. That's how it sounded when you read it. So I thought, none of this really makes sense. So if you said we can't get a certificate, if the development downtown meets these standards, they will be required by legislation to get it. We don't have to put it in our charter. Either they are required or they're not. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So all I asked was, is that something we want to reiterate in our charter so that if the legislature does away with it tomorrow, we still have it? I understand everybody's point completely. I'm not suggesting we do that. I think it would restrict us, and nobody else would be restricted, and they have the same big straw in the aquifer taking out all the water, and they're going to get the development, and nothing will be developed here. But it's a restriction that's in statute now. Do you know anything more about the 5 areas and whether you have a development that meets that criteria?
Yeah, so the 5 areas are part of the 1980 Groundwater Management Act. So they're Phoenix, Tucson, Prescott, Flagstaff, and there's one more I'm missing. But they were defined by the 1980 Groundwater Management Act to, look at where the population was, what the, where the historic groundwater use had been. We looked at a lot of, particularly out here at Luke, we had a lot of subsidence. We've dropped 15 feet over the last 60 years, near Luke, just, from a collapsing aquifer. So the 1980 Groundwater Management Act is a really kind of a landmark piece of legislation. But at the time, they said, okay, they've put in this idea of a 100-year water supply. But I would say, again, the model is what shows that there's a 100-year water supply exists. The model is built by very smart scientists, but it is by no means perfect.
Right.
So if the model doesn't say you have a 100-year water supply, maybe you have 98, maybe you have 107. But it's the output of the model that's dictating what we're doing. And then, yes, it's subdivided lots, so it's meant for major subdivisions. Generally, the requirement is not placed on industrial or commercial use. It's primarily for residential to support population growth. I do know that we use, just Arizona-wide, we use annually about as much water in Arizona today as we did in 1950. So, in terms of conservation, we've come a long way. A lot of that is the retirement of ag and better processes in ag to utilize water in more efficient manners. What the 100-year water supply also says is, if the groundwater model does not tell you could, like the groundwater model shows that there's not enough groundwater, it just means you have to get the water from somewhere else.
Right.
So, that's why people are buying water rights.
Right. So we talked about that last time too. The East Valley cities that are going crazy are all buying farmland in northern Arizona just for the water rights so they can pump more water out down here, and that land is just going to sit in fallow.
Well, they can't pump more water out of the ground. The rights that are associated, they're generally surface water rights, so they have to get the water they have to wheel it, and it comes through the CAP canal. Right. So they're not pumping more groundwater by buying those rights. They're buying the rights.
Surface water.
They're buying surface water rights that they have to get here. One of the things that we've got here now that's good, and in terms of our water table here in the West Valley and Mitchell Park. So Liberty has their groundwater recharge facility just north of Camelback. It's going to put 2,500 acre feet of water.
Who owns it?
Liberty. And it's part of a commitment with the Central Arizona Groundwater Recharge District. So there's efforts to put water back into the ground. Liberty pumps effluent up to these ponds and then it soaks back into the ground. So they're doing things to maintain our water table. I don't think we're at risk here.
Mr. City Manager, do you think there is do we need to put something, is there something that legally we could do or put in just to help preserve it? Does it need to be done?
As far as the 100-year?
Conservation of water, not necessarily the 100-year component, but somehow helping our city to protect its water and...
Mr. Chairman, I think you could certainly say that we encourage our citizens to use their water responsibly, consistent along those lines. But as far as saying something with a specific measurement, I think that would be hard. But I think to say a general recommendation would be a good thing.
So, do you get data from Liberty on water usage in the city of Litchfield Park?
Not as much as we'd like to.
Can you get data from it? Let me just say, the reason I ask is, the cities who have their own water utilities measure the use of water in their city, all right? And they break it down by residential and commercial, and do all kinds of things. And then they spend tons of money to try to encourage water conservation. If you go to Phoenix or Mesa or Chandler or any of those places, and you walk into a Home Depot, there's a big sign. Says the city of Phoenix will rebate you $100 if you buy the slow flow toilet, right? They spend money to encourage water conservation, and then they, at the end of the year, they say to the city council, the number of gallons used per resident last year was this, and this year was this, and we're making progress. So I would love to see that happen. It's hard to put in a charter if you can't get the data. So I appreciate all of this, and I don't know what the board wants to do, but I just thought, if we're developing a charter now, not in 1900 when water seemed to, be everywhere, to not address, like you said, to not address water conservation and water issues at this point would be irresponsible.
I think, who did I interrupt? Okay, I think, just listening to all of the inputs here, I think we could address it at a high level, but as far as like the details of how that happens, I think it seems to be best left to the council.
I would be willing to be so vague to just say the city manager will deliver a written report to the city council each year on the water conservation efforts that have been taken up during that year and the success that they've had. As something as just so that we're saying in the charter, look, this is important. Don't ignore this until there's no water left. Address it every year.
I'd be glad to do that.
Is there a merit, do you think there's a role that we could put some sort of a general statement on that without restricting the city of Litchfield in terms of what we do, or?
What I would say if the board wants to try to do that, try to write something, and then once the charter, we can see the languages in the charter, we can look at it and determine, how is that gonna work. It gets really difficult. I mean, we wanted, I don't know if you saw, out here we have these really big medians in Wigwam Boulevard. They used to be really small medians, and Wigwam Boulevard was 2 lanes going each direction. And so we had people going 45 and 50 miles an hour all up and down on Boulevard. So the concept we had was, well, let's make the medians bigger. So now it's only a 1-lane road, and it'll calm this traffic. Seems like a simple idea. So start doing all this with the median. So then the question came up was, well, with the ADWR, the water people, the water czars, will they allow us to put grass in the expanded median? We have grass in the old median, but now can we put grass in a bigger median? And it got so much that we wanted to go all the way down the Wigwam with putting in medians and changing the landscaping so that it was all more consistent. And as you get down past Nolan, I think it is, then the landscaping basically changes from grass and orange trees and palm trees to, desert landscaping and no medians. So we were not permitted by the water people to make any changes to the east of Nolan because it would increase our water use. Now, this was back before there was even any concern about water particularly. And I can tell you, it's a very difficult world where you think the concept is really good, I don't think the amount of water that we use in these medians is really particularly relevant to whether we have a 100-year supply or not. But there are regulations that literally keep us, so if you look at the landscaping that's being done in the Litchfield Square, well, that landscaping can't be grass and orange trees and palm trees. We can't do it. We just can't, we're not allowed, we're not permitted. So you just have to be careful. There's unintended consequences as you go through some of this stuff. So just be careful.
So, Kenny, maybe you could put together with the city manager a short little briefing that might be general enough that we
Well,
can
I
add,
think,
or?
I mean, that's, the least we can do is at least say that the city manager will put in front of the city council each year what efforts are being made to conserve water in the city, and the city council will at least look at that and say, oh, we're doing nothing again, okay? Or, these are really good efforts. I mean, they will at least have to comment on it each year, and I you know,
Okay, what,
it's no restriction at all, other than bringing awareness to the city council that we are trying to conserve water. It's, and maybe Liberty, you know, comes forward with some data for you, so you could see how much we're using.
One thing I would say on this, one, I'd be glad to provide a report to council. I have no problem doing that, sir. I don't think it's a bad idea, to be honest. That being said, as far as Liberty goes, in a perfect world, you could say exactly how many gallons are coming into Litchfield Park. That being said, Liberty serves us, a little bit of Glendale. They serve Goodyear north of I-10. And like, for example, the reason your water pressure got better back in late August was because they opened the Goodyear interconnect, which means we're directly hooked to the Goodyear system when the interconnect is open. My point being, it's not so you say this is just city water, is my point. But do an annual presentation, I'd be glad to.
Every water use is metered, and they know where every meter is. This is just a matter of whether they want to give you the data. Go ahead.
Kenny, why don't we, have you,
So anyway,
if you could put something together on
Yeah,
that,
that's
and then
fine.
we'll talk about that, and then we can bring that up at the next meeting.
that's fine. You know, and if nobody else agrees that we should pay any attention to water.
And then I think we're gonna have to get input from the legal, if whether they believe that that's something that we need to have or can have in there. Okay, great. So now we're at the point, we are still, remember, we are on a bit of a timeline in terms of getting this complete. We've had one pass through the entire document. We did receive today, an amended copy that came through on the email, and I know this was a late delivery. It should be on your Gmail, if you didn't get it, then, are we gonna have it up here? Yeah, we're gonna have it up here. I don't wanna go through this in the depth that, and I don't believe we have to the time and depth that we went through the first time. It would be good if we could get through it, some sections, and if everybody kind of likes the way it's been written and the changes made, we kind of move through it again. There are a few areas that we, we didn't make any final decisions on, that I would like to try to get through a few of those, the more complicated ones. With a timeline, then everybody having get an opportunity to go through it on their own a little bit more, with some discussions again with it on Thursday, and look to maybe have a final vote a week from today, if we can get some things done. Yes, Sonny?
Mr. Chairman, that sounds ambitious to me, but, I think what we did is we went through it, and I read through it today. There's a lot of things where it says, the board felt this needs more discussion.
Correct.
The board felt this needs more discussion. So we're gonna find as we get to these areas, that's where we need to go ahead and have that discussion and decide on a section, on that section, are we happy with this now? Not, let's come back to it again.
Correct.
And take those steps. And if we do that, did you say after Thursday's meeting, we'd take a vote on the next?
No, a
meeting?
week from today.
Well,
That'd be next
yeah,
Tuesday.
that would be next Tuesday.
The 19th.
So let's just see how far we get.
Give it
I mean,
12.
I love that, but I think that's the approach I would recommend, and if everyone's,
Agreed.
agrees with that. That once we said, let's discuss this,
Yeah.
or there was some difference, well, then let's go ahead and discuss it and make a decision.
Absolutely.
I think staff and the attorneys did a nice job of summarizing in those bubbles on the right, the issues that we said we need to discuss further, and I agree with you, Si. If we hit those, we don't want to wordsmith it, right? Marty's good at that, I'm not good at that. But if you hit those issues that we said need further discussion, and we get through all of those, and then kind of turn it back over to the attorneys and staff to say, now go wordsmith it and bring us back a nice, clean document with all the decisions made. I think Tuesday's pretty aggressive too, but, you know, who knows, maybe.
Yeah, let's just go.
Yeah, it'll be hard.
All right, well, let's go. Article 1.
So we're just gonna look at the bubbles on the right where they say.
I think that's a good starting point right there. And then I think what we should,
If you want to follow.
so, I'm sorry,
They're putting it up there.
Councilman, Mr. Brainerd, did you have a question on something?
No, she asked.
No.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
Is everybody good right now to get going like we're doing?
Yes.
So the first bubble appears in, on Article 1, Section 3,
A2.
2. And it had something to do with bike paths and should be adjusted to address golf carts.
I asked that, I thought that needed to be inserted in there.
Can you legally traverse a bike path on a golf cart now? I know they were built for that in the old
Our
days.
paths are just.
Our ordinance is actually provide for sidewalks, we cannot take golf carts, and that's defined by the width of the sidewalk, or pathways. Pathways are for people to walk, bikes to be on them, and golf carts. And golf carts are legal on our pathways, and they're the wider path, concrete path.
So is that,
Generally, they're colored.
so pathways is defined in city code,
Correct.
so we could just put pathways in there?
Pathways, yes,
Okay,
Pathways is defined.
okay.
that's what I was saying.
So I'd bet instead of bike paths, they're just pathways. Good.
I agree. On page 3.
So we'll move that was page 1. We'll move to page 2. It was pretty clear, I don't see anything in the side boundaries. Pardon me?
There was something underlined there that needed a need. But I don't know if we're wanting to catch those things or not.
I think grammar and some spelling, those things we're gonna, we don't have to do right now. And then I think it was brought up at one meeting, there was the way the language was written, some people thought maybe it needed to be a little bit more concise or clear. But my understanding is there's some legal, writing in here that you would prefer, we don't have a lot of leeway to change. It has to stay in that legal format, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
a lot of it.
I think the discussion, though, Mr. Chairman, was whether the mayor needed to be 25 years of age and whether council members need to be 21 years of age, because right now I think it's 18 years of age, and that was where we said, well, we need to discuss that first.
Yes.
Right.
And I suggested that you don't have a different age for the mayor and the council members, because when the mayor vacates, then a council member who's currently the vice mayor may not qualify to be the mayor, because they wouldn't, I would just say, just give an age. All council members and mayor are the same age. This is just plucked out of somebody else's, right? You guys didn't recommend these ages.
What is that age you're recommending?
Generally, it's
They're not.
25.
Oh, me?
Yes.
I like it.
In the other charters, it generally is 25.
So we could just,
I can go as young as, I can go to 21. I've seen small towns who've had mayors that were 18 and did a fine job. I don't think age is important to me. I would say if you're old enough to vote, you're
Sonny?
old enough to be mayor or councilman.
I think the point is, if whoever runs is gonna have to run in front of the citizens and make their case of whether they should be mayor or not mayor, on the council or not on the council. And so whatever age we put, let's let the voters decide
Yeah.
who gets elected.
So if anybody has any strong feelings, express them now. I think we can get by this. Let's just say, what is the age? Let's take a vote and let's get to it.
wanna make a motion?
21 or 25?
No, I don't care.
I'm the youngest, I think I might be the youngest person on the board, I'm not sure, but, that being said, I think it should be 25.
I don't think that anybody 18 or 21 has any business running a city and on council or as a mayor. So I think 25 is a minimum.
Like I said, I don't have any strong feelings, whatever you guys think is fine.
All right,
So we don't need to make a motion. Do you want to just do a hand count? Who thinks 25? Anybody think 21? Any other discussion on that? Will, I mean, what's your,
I just think that, extraordinary people do extraordinary things regardless of age. I don't think you should discount people, especially in a town this size with regard to age. You might find a fantastic 18-year-old that at some point do the job. Maybe not as well as our current mayor, but certainly maybe the best at the time. As I said, I would never discount. If you're old enough to vote and participate in our democratic process, you're old enough to put yourself up, I think, at this level.
Bobby, what do you think?
Well, like we said earlier on that table, that the people are gonna vote, we're voting on it, so the age doesn't matter, so.
So let's have the
So,
head count turn out.
so
But
I'd
between
like to,
25 and
I'd like to voice my comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't feel that there needs to be an age, in here either. It's up to the residents. If somebody is 18 years of age and, they qualify and the residents, want them in that position, I feel that they should be awarded that position, regardless of
So
age.
Qualified voter.
Qualified
Qualified.
voter.
You okay with that too?
Mayor, what do you think of that?
I don't know, well, less than 65 is concerning.
Those young whippersnappers.
All right, so let's take, how many people think that 18 or above would be appropriate? How about, so the 25, 21, or 18? Who wants 25? 2, 3, 4, 5. Who wants 21? And who wants a registered voter, a voting age?
Qualified voter.
Qualified voter. 1, 2. That one.
Send them off to war, they can buy a gun.
So this is just preliminary. So however this turns out, we put it in there, the next line.
I'd like, Mr. City Manager, what do you think if we had that, Mr. Qualified voters, and not an age restriction, other than that?
To be honest, it's hard for me to imagine a mayor being 18 years old, being an 18-year-old high school student. I'd be more than 25.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't vote.
Just my preference.
Why can't they run?
I have a hard time seeing our community electing an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I just don't think it should preclude them from running.
Well, you like 21, you said 21, but then you dropped down to...
Because no one was discussing 18
We're now at
or
18,
registered
we're now at
voters.
18 or 25. Is it currently just qualified voters? I don't think we have an age restriction, right? And we haven't elected any 18-year-olds?
I know.
Okay.
It may never happen.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say on that is, you can Google it, you can read about high school students being elected mayor. I mean, for all seriousness, there was a city that elected a dog as mayor, I'm not kidding. You can look it up, it happened. But again, it's my fault.
Maybe we can look at 21-year-old then.
If the dog is qualified voter.
Where were we on
Yeah, like, so there's-
I'm prepared to support whatever the majority is
Yeah, me
here,
too.
by the way.
Same.
All right, so we'll do one more time.
So can I, we're
Go
talking
ahead.
about mayor right now, correct?
No.
Or are we talking about both of them?
Mayor and council.
So.
Both, mayor and
We're
council.
going to have, same age for both a mayor and a council member. And we could either have a table full of 21-year-olds, or a table, or 25-year-olds, or a table full of 18-year-olds. That's the possibility. Those are the two possibilities that we're looking at. Or we could have a table full of qualified voters, which are also 18-year-olds.
Right.
So then we'll vote, again, we'll have two different votes. It'll be 25, or it'll be qualified voter.
I just want to clarify, the current status is no age limit. Is that correct? So anything we do is going to change that. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. There's currently no age limit, so anything we do is going to change that.
Unless we say qualified voters.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
So,
That's what it states.
all those
states
that
right
would
now.
like to have it say qualified voter without age restriction, show of hands. 2, 4, 6, 7. All those that say 20,
And there's 8.
Oh, and Susan says, okay, so that's 8, yes. So then all those that say 25 and above,
That's
yeah, we're done. Okay. So then that'll be how that'll write, okay, how that'll work, qualified voter. So then this is another one that came up, and then it has to do with terms of council members. Right now, we currently do not have any term limits, is that correct?
Correct.
So I'd like to get just a show of hands, how many people think there should be some form of term limits? And then how,
Can we talk about it before we have to show our hands and hear logic behind?
Yeah.
But,
sure, go ahead.
my thought on it, first of all, is we're drawing from a very small pool. And if we don't have people beating down the doors to do this job.
Just wait, Lisa, just wait.
I'm waiting.
I'm coming.
Good. We'll welcome you with open arms. But seriously, we don't have, it's not like we're turning backs to people. Term limits, if we have someone who is in this position and able to financially take advantage of it, I mean, we're not able to, I don't see this as being way for us. If there is, I would think it is a term limit. I don't know.
Could we have it where you limited them, I mean, they could be
No.
4 terms or something like that?
Where are we now and, I mean, how many,
Right now, there are no term limits.
right, I know, but thinking of our current council, how many years, how many terms has John
That's
served?
not what we're
I
discussing.
think we already came to an agreement. I think we had this discussion and everybody agreed no term limits.
No, we have not.
Well,
I just wrote that,
Hey,
I
it's
just
still,
wrote that we.
we have not done that, we were still talking about
Yeah, we're still
their
waiting.
term limits.
So this issue here in the bubble is not that. The issue in the bubble is make sure the staggered terms
Right.
that we specify.
That was
Kenny,
on
Kenny,
voting for
wait,
city
Kenny.
manager,
Hey, point of
remember?
order here, Kenny.
Voting
We
on
were
off-
just, those were all discussions.
Yeah.
We never made any final whether there's no term limits or not,
Okay.
Yeah,
so.
it's just voting on off cycles, so remember?
Can I ask a question?
remember the discussion of we need to be more specific, instead of saying staggered terms, you
Hold on,
say
Kenny,
staggered.
Kenny, hold on a second.
Report, right.
Go ahead.
My question would be, I guess, to staff and to the current mayor in the room. What are the pros and cons of having term limits?
Go ahead, Mr. City Manager.
Susan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would tell you, the con side of term limits is exactly as Councilman Brendan Watson said, is that we're a small city. We're a small city, we don't have we're limited how many good people they have to run, and also, it's hard to get people to run for public office anymore. People don't like to run for office anymore, they just don't, so that's hard. We're very lucky with the council that we have, we're very blessed with a good council. The other side of that, I would tell you, is that you can have council members that can be there too long, that become an institution of, it's for example, like a church pastor. If you ever see a church pastor there for 40 years, it becomes their church, instead of the one it should be, of course. You see what I'm saying? So, as I said last time, the mayor is the best mayor I've ever had. I would tell you, if you look sitting here, I've had 90, best one I've ever had by far. But a contrasting example I would have would be my hometown. I don't know if I've told you that before. They had the same mayor and council since 1968. Over 250 years experience on council. And then they also retired and died at the same time. And they went from having $60 million cash on hand to a new administration that spent it all in one term. That totally blew up what they spent decades setting up. There's pros and cons to that, right? And I would say, if you're going to do term limits, as Chairman said, there's things you could do. You could say, for example, 4 fours. 4 fours means 4 4-year terms. You could also do it so they could be a council member for so many terms and be a mayor for so many terms. I would also recommend you do it, of course, where it wouldn't affect your incumbent. So it's totally up to you. On one hand, it's up to the voters. The voters decide if people have term limits or not. But also, of course, the incumbents have an advantage. So did you catch all that?
Mayor?
Thank you. Yes, I did.
Yeah, my thoughts, obviously I've been mayor for a long time, and some of that's because there hasn't been anybody who has wanted to run against me. And some of it's because I've had a lot of things going on that I really wanted to stay and work on. So it's been a combination. So I can't tell you that there weren't people all those years who couldn't have just run and been fine. But I can tell you that the longevity and the consistency that we've had on the council between myself and Paul Faith particularly, because we've been here, Paul's been here 20 years, I've been here 7 years. There's a consistency to the way the policies are set up, and there's a consistency. One of the reasons why our financial condition is so good is because Paul and I have consistently worked to make sure that we didn't get too much residential as compared to commercial. Tremendous amount of pressure as we've, over the last 16 years, to convert land from commercial to residential, because it could be developed quickly and the developer could make money. But if we had done that, then the whole financial structure of our city would not have worked like it is today. Those kind of policies are hard for councils to stay consistent on if you're churning people all the time. So I think on balance, our council has been it's been very good for our council not to have term limits. But at the same time, we've had council members come in and go out, so there's been ideas coming in and out through the council spots on the some council positions. I think it's worked well. The one thing that I feel a responsibility for, and I think I said this to people when we started this charter movement, was I want to get more of the younger people involved, because we need more young people coming into the council. We need more young people who can find out more about how the city operates, why the policies work in certain ways, so that we can get really good quality candidates for mayor. I mean, there's no question we need to do that. And I feel a personal responsibility to try to make that happen, and that's one of the outcomes that I hope this charter effort would make, is we get people more interested in the city again, you'd spend some time thinking about it and become interested, and we'd see either not just freeholders, but people you know and people you talk to, people in the community, because we're talking about the charter, they would become more interested. So that it is important for us as a city to keep younger people coming into the council and being part of the process, and taking over the responsibility of being mayor. I mean, it is absolutely essential. I don't think term limits necessarily are the answer to it, but I think as a policy statement within the charter, I think the charter, it should say that citizens encourage turnover on the council, so that there's a process where more people are getting their ideas, into the mix on how the city's governed. So, exactly how you might say that, I'm not sure, but the concept, I think, is important. It is a good one, but I think term limits they're limiting in the sense of, clearly, one of the things, I was involved in the incorporation of the city, and we would go around and we'd meet in people's living rooms and talk to 10 people or 5 people, and because we literally had to have 100% of people sign these petitions so we could incorporate without having a vote. So one of the things that was talked about consistently by the people who lived here then was, what happens if we don't have good people on the council? What happens? We're taking a big risk if we incorporate, and then we get, people on the council who they're not good stewards of our city. So I think limiting the term is a mistake. I think we need to encourage people to run. We need to encourage and develop people who are interested in being on the council. But I think we should let the people decide how long somebody should serve.
Thank you, Mayor.
On this particular bubble that we're talking about, actually, this is only addressing whether we're gonna have staggered terms, not term limits. I think we bypassed the idea of term limits. I do remember we did that. So if you look, what's on the bubble, it's mainly, are we gonna have staggered terms and how do we word that?
And it wasn't whether we were gonna have them, it's just more clearly defining.
Right.
We currently have something that says staggered terms. We were just saying, we have to clarify that it's 3 each
Right,
time,
but it wasn't
not
term.
2, 2, 2, or 1 every
There was
6.
never a final thing that
Right.
we weren't gonna have term limits. There was still some
Yeah,
discussion,
there's still
should we have
discussion.
term limits? That's what we're talking about right now. We can phase into that there.
So I'm,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I'm taking the notes of this discussion on section 7, which is reserved. If you wanted to put it in the, I'm taking notes as though we would make that a new section. Is that not what you, if someone had a more specific.
There's, yeah. You might have jumped ahead of.
Yeah, the red line.
There was in the draft that I saw.
Then why would it say term 4 years?
Those, I think, were all, weren't they?
Terms of mayor, terms of
Yeah,
council.
'cause they're
Four staggered
terms.
terms, four staggered, what does it say, 4 years
4
staggered
year
terms.
staggered terms.
Right, but it doesn't say how many 4-year
Right.
staggered terms you can serve.
Right.
But it was somewhere in the document.
But we did talk about it.
I know we did talk about it.
Can I let me let Terry,
Currently, it's the mayor and 3 council members,
Right.
4 years, and then the other 3 are 2
Right.
years.
And we talked about that, just clarifying, put that language in here, so it doesn't just say staggered terms, it says 3 each 4 years, right? So, but we also talked about term limits, because I remember saying, in the big cities, where people make a lot of money to be a council member,
We got a big-
they carry over donations, and they have a significant advantage over anybody running against them. They have this big pot of money to run against people, but that isn't the case here. We have a hard time getting
Yeah,
qualified
yeah.
people.
right
So I
now in
think
this
we all
document,
said,
let me just
let's
clarify from the
not-
legal, in the document, we have already, it says there are no term limits.
So two things, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about, I think we're turning into 2 separate topics of discussion here. So one is, I'm not any more expert than any of you in what's in this document, because we all have a copy. I don't think it has term limits in it. And I don't think it did last time either, but I do believe that the red line that was submitted before last time, and then you got a new copy, right?
Yes.
I think that had term limits that was removed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they weren't in it, so we did have a big discussion about term limits.
Okay.
I don't believe there's anything in the document, so I'm taking notes on this discussion about term limits, section 7, which is currently reserved, there's an empty space there, we
Okay.
could create a section about term limits.
Does anybody want to speak on behalf of term limits? Nobody has said why they might want them.
Well, so Mr. Chairman, the other thing this is a great time to point out, I think, is, again, and I haven't said it yet this meeting, this is scratch paper, you can do whatever you want, right? And so I'll remind, since we don't have written language from last time documenting, we did, sounds like, Board Member Jones remembers this discussion really well.
Yes.
I think Matthew made some similar comments last time too. The other thing we talked about was the current status. And so someone asked today whether there's currently term limits. They're not, and the reason is, currently, the city can't create its own term limit. The voters can establish term limits for council members. The council doesn't have that power. In the charter, so this is an area where you have the power to create something the city can't currently do.
Right.
And so there currently is nothing either in this draft or in the city code. And so I think the question for you is, do you want to create a new section in this charter to talk about term limits? Sorry, Board Member Jones.
Can you all answer, now, the current term is 3 years?
4 years.
4 years. It's a 4-year term. We still have to, do we still have to discern whether we're gonna keep it as a 4-year term, or is that a foregone conclusion, it's gonna be a 4-year
I think we
term?
just wanted to clarify, it currently says
Reoccurring.
4-year staggered terms, but what it doesn't say is how many each 4 years. It should say 3 in the first 4 years, 4 years later, it's 3 more plus the mayor. And we just want to clarify that that's what it says. So I think we all agreed on
You
that.
mean how to do the stagger?
How to do,
Mhm.
it can't just say staggered terms, it should say exactly how they're staggered. And then I think we're ready, Chair, to take a vote on whether we want to include term limits.
Okay, so then we'll go back up then where what Sonny's talking about. So on the area that's highlighted, need more direction as staggering, 3 this time, 3 plus mayor next time and all that. That's what you're wanting to get clarified.
I
D,
think-
right?
I
Correct.
think we just kind of all agreed that they just need to clarify that language in the document.
Okay,
And is that what it's?
In more layman's
Rough
terms.
consensus, everybody wants that, basically, that's a rough version of what's going in.
Yes.
Right?
clarify that on the,
Right.
right. And then on section 7, which is reserved, do we want to put something in there that's limits, term limits?
So I will speak in favor of term limits, and I'm not in favor of 8 years. I'm in favor of like 20 years. We're talking a generation. I think it is important for today's leaders to train the next generation of leaders. I think that, and I think the mayor is right, I don't want to see people termed out. I do think there is enough talent in this city, and there's enough people who care enough about this city that if a current person who is going to term out, they can identify somebody, they can identify multiple people, they can encourage them, they can say, please come in and participate in this process. You would be good for this city. This is a small town. Part of a small town is, even though we don't have war chests, it's impossible to unseat an incumbent unless they do something really crazy. Let's be honest, and not that anybody's here done a bad job and should be unseated for any reason, but in a small town, it's really hard to run against a 5, 6, 7, 8-term city council person. So I'm in favor of, term limits at a generation's length, 5 terms of 4 years. We can go to 6, just so that there is acknowledgement, from us that we want people to participate in this process, that it can't be run by a small group of people indefinitely, and that there is, by putting in the charter, we are encouraging those people that are city council, future city council people, that are future mayors, that you should train the next person. You should help identify and find the next person, train them, teach them what it's like to be, and maybe those people say no, but then go find the next person. This is not a city of unqualified people. This is a very educated city. This is a city with one of the highest median incomes in the area. Like, we don't have a shortage of unqualified people. We maybe have a shortage of motivated people, but that's part of the city council's job, or, if we put in term limits, is finding those people, motivate them, get them to participate in the process. So, we can vote, and I'm not going to be upset if there are no term limits, but I just think it's generally a good idea, especially in a small town. Let's bring other people in, and I wouldn't put any restrictions on people currently serving. So if we wrote this, the 5 terms start now. So, Mr. Mayor, you could be mayor for 20 more years if you'd like.
Lisa, what do you think of that?
Well, I wanted to say a couple things, and I'm glad your last statement, because if we did put it in effect right now, we would essentially lose John Romack, Paul Faith, Mayor Schoaf. So we would lose half of our city council. I also want to compliment the mayor, because he does do exactly what you're saying. When I first got elected, first time, first thing he did was call me and say, can we sit down and meet, and I want to talk to you about how the city's actually run, what the city manager, mayor responsibility role looks like, and it was really enlightening and good. And then additionally, he did another thing. I ran because Jeff Rabel came to me. He was on city council, and he was moving, and he said, I think you'd be good, would you think about it? So we do have people who do that. We do need to get younger blood and younger people. I just worry about a limit if we have the situation like we have now. We don't have people step up.
Well,
But can I ask about that for a second? What scares you about terming out at 20 years? What scares you about 5-term limit? Or 4 for that matter? I mean.
Well, right now, I can give you a great example. Right now, Mayor Schoaf knows the entire history of the project that we've been trying to get going here for 20 years.
Yeah, more
than that, yeah. And so his knowledge is invaluable. Paul Faith is the same way. Paul can sit down in a meeting and say, I think it was 8 years ago, we talked about this, and we made a motion, and we voted this way, and Terry goes back to the minutes, and I'll be darned, there it is, he's got that experience. So I do think that experience is really valuable, and that history. I would hate to see us do anything that forced people off in the middle of this project, just because of the importance of what it is to the city. Other than that, I'm not worried about, we've set up enough or safeguards that city council member doesn't make money on there. I don't think we're gonna pay anybody, nobody indicated they want to be paid. It's not like you can parlay it into a big position. We're not getting any money from China or anything like that. I don't know, that's.
Well, I have a question, I just have something to say. It's like, if we have these staggered terms, right, with the city council, so basically, realistically, we have 3 council, positions coming up, because we're on a staggered, basically a staggered election period. So what if those 3 council people don't want to run? We have 3 open positions. Do you know 3 people exactly here right now that could fill those 3 positions? So you have to look at basically, it's a small group of people, and I know people always say, oh yeah, I would love to run for city, oh yeah, I'm gonna run for city council, but a lot of people just don't show up. I mean, it was amazing that we had all these people wanting to come to be a freeholder, but that doesn't always happen, and I think that's what protects us with this staggered election, that people do come up to get reelected, and the citizens of Litchfield Park are gonna vote them in or vote them out. So, I mean, a term limit, because city council comes up every 3 years, right? It would really be a term limit, really, for the mayor and the vice mayor, and I don't know.
We wouldn't apply it to existing council.
Yeah.
But I agree with your point, and I agree with most of what people said, which is, if you have people who are qualified and the elector likes them,
Right.
and everybody in town wants them to stay in office, then they shouldn't. But I also agree that there should be
A
some
mentorship?
mentoring, you know.
So maybe put that into the charter about some kind of mentoring line the mayor's
Well,
gotta do in council, because Andrew and Tom said it perfectly, as far as that's one of the key things we need to do.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was thinking that it wasn't a good idea to have term limits, but then listening to Andrew, I can see it. I can see that 20 years is a long time.
Yeah, and the problem,
you know,
yeah.
again, we're trying to do something that's for the future, not just, that's fine, we have a good council. We're not always gonna have that, maybe, and so I don't think that 20 years is a long time. And if we're doing with other people.
just a couple of thoughts. The first is that to accomplish what people who support term limits, to accomplish that, typically, across the state, term limit is 2 4-year terms. Maybe 2, and then 2 more 4-year terms, so you could be 8 years as a council member and 8 years as a mayor. That's typically what it is. I don't know of any term-limited cities where you have 20 years in the term limit, because it's such a long period of time that you're not accomplishing. There literally are very, very few people who stay in these positions 20 years. It's a long time. Second thing is that if something happens where you need to get the council to change, where the council is doing something that the citizens or the businesses within Litchfield are really unhappy with, something serious, you also have recall, which is really a simple thing to do in a city this size. I mean, I think the number of signatures to get a council member recall is probably 150. I mean, it's a very low number. And it's actually been used in Litchfield Park for that reason in our history. If you go back to the mid-90s, the council put in a specific plan that applied to the area where Litchfield Square is now. It was owned at the time by the people who owned the Wigwam. They got very upset with what the council was doing, and so they went in and recalled the mayor and 2 or 3 council members. And they had a campaign. It was really, really ugly, and all of them were kicked out of office. Literally. So then all of a sudden there was a new mayor, 3 new council members, so the whole council changed. And that remedy in terms of if there's a problem with council, is always available for anyone who's served, I think it's a year, isn't it? I think it's 1 year. Yeah, so anytime somebody has gotten 1 year into their term, they can be recalled. So it just doesn't take that much to do it. 6 months.
Let's get just a good kind of another show of hands of people that really think we need to have term limits.
Show of hands.
And then those of you that think that if we let the voters decide on term limits, but then we could put some stipulation in there in terms of how discussion or mentoring the future and making sure that
I
that,
agree.
Yeah,
Can I make a comment about that part?
yeah,
It's starting to sound like a mission statement.
okay.
And I think that's where that really is more appropriate, and it fits in exactly with the water thing. You know, we want to create a community that's sustainable in housing, that's sustainable in water, sustainable in the
Well, that's something we could, but, okay, that's fine.
What I'm saying, I think it's a better place there than in this
Agreed.
document.
So back to then, those of you that think that there should be some form of term limit, again, raise your hand. And those of you that don't think there should be any form of term limits. So I think what we can do then is on that section 7, that the term limits are limited by the voter? Or does that?
No,
Just put
there's
that-
no
just
term
eliminate.
limit.
There's eliminated, yeah.
Okay.
It's gonna, the onus will be on the electorate to recall if they're,
All right, I think if we can, we'll take a 5-minute break here.
okay.
There's food, bathroom.
You got 3 pages.
Because Marty keeps talking.
They don't want to go on. No, it's fine. Like I'm trying to protect you. I don't want to.
I got the best mentoring story. The mayor says, you're gonna run for council next time. He gives me the paper.
I'm gonna do it once.
Okay.
So getting something
Okay,
up.
yeah.
I'm burning up.
Nice and comfy in here.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is in
Burning
my
up.
house. I'm freezing. Crank it down.
I'm hot.
Yeah.
I'm hot,
Next meeting?
yeah.
Yes.
Stop bragging.
Weren't you freezing over in the library
Mhm,
though?
mhm.
Okay.
I was under the vent. It was like blowing right on me. I'm like, oh my God, that is horrible.
So then, as far as that, we. Yeah, good. All right, so if everybody's got a little something, we can move forward. So we're pretty much through section 7, 8, 9, 10. There was a note on section 10 regarding the vice mayor. Should the vice mayor stay until voted out or be elected every 2 years?
I think
Can you scroll
it's
down
always,
to that?
I remember the council member saying, it's always been every 2 years, that has been tradition. And do we want to put that in the charter?
That's the way it currently is now.
Right.
We have a 4-year term and they're elected 2 years staggered term. 2 years staggered. So in 2025, I'll have 3 open seats.
No, we're talking about the vice mayor. So the council votes for the vice mayor to be the vice mayor.
Yes,
And they don't vote for them to do it for 2 years. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been kind of an informal process.
They
But
do it their first meeting.
the question is, do we want to say in here that it's 2 years? That you're in there for 2 years and then somebody else is vice mayor?
No term limit.
Right?
I don't think it should change, but they should be
Yeah, there's no term.
recognized whether they're gonna remain the vice mayor or not. So in other words, I don't think you should say someone else has to be the new vice mayor, because that's.
You just have to be renamed again.
Has been reelected, reappointed.
So you're saying every 2 years they name the vice mayor, but it could be the same person?
It could be the same person.
I don't care what we do, but
Yeah.
it's in here. It doesn't currently say anything anywhere, right? In the rules and regs, does it say the vice mayor shall,
It must be.
for 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then why can't we just have it worded the way it is now? The vice mayor should stay at the pleasure of the council
Does it say 2 years?
and be elected every 2 years.
Well,
The vice mayor's, other than performing the mayor's duty if the mayor becomes incapacitated, is more of a ceremonial position. I mean, there's no special power
right,
as a vice mayor.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's not elected as vice mayor by the people.
right.
Right.
Did you have a comment on that?
Mr. Chair, you can do either way. The last conversation, I think, we were talking about the two, and Mayor Schultz recommended just pick one of them, don't do both. And I think that's kind of where the conversation ended, and so we can come back and pick one. Either every 2 years or every month.
We're gonna pick one, either 2 years?
That was where the conversation kind of ended, was, well, the two options being, well, either every 2 years they would go to the vice mayor, or he just serves at the pleasure of the council, which is until they decide to.
So they decide to boot him.
I think that's the way we should leave it, since we've already come, there's no term limits, we can just do it the second way you said. Is there consensus on that?
Is it saying we're keeping it the same as we are
Keep it the same.
doing
Yeah,
now?
we don't need to vote,
Okay,
yeah.
as long as we're saying keeping it.
Don't they vote on it every 2 years now?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
They vote on it every 2 years,
Yeah, right now we do, I think.
For the vice mayor?
Yes.
and they just keep reappointing the same. So just keep it that way.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed.
So every 2 years.
The
Correct.
process can be very, it's very, strategic. We all go, nose goes. You've never heard that.
No.
All right, so we'll just leave it at that at 2 years. So just moving ahead in section 11, compensation. Is there a consensus that this should remain a volunteer position and that, we're not gonna compensate city council, or do we have to put something in there that would have to go to a vote, or?
Well, I don't think that's the current status. The current status is they can give themselves raises. I mean, they can give themselves pay, if they want.
Is that,
Yeah, so I like the status quo, which is if council members choose to, they can institute a pay increase. That would be maintaining the status, implement pay. that would be maintaining the status quo. The thing that changed was, and then you have to go to the voters to change it, and that seems cumbersome. I would just rather have council members decide, if we want to be the first council members to get paid, we can do it by ordinance. And then, I mean, that's the way it is now.
I think the discussion on this was a little bit of optics though as well as something, is there something in there that people would look at, oh, they're gonna give themselves pay now, they're gonna give themselves a raise?
Oh, so
And-
just
and-
say nothing and let it stay how
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that too.
For comparison, Mr. Chair and members, ARS 9274 says, that when you become a city, the council may fix the salaries of all the members. And then by ordinance or resolution, they can provide the compensation to be provided to each of the mayor and the council.
So you're saying, we just leave this section out and we're complying with statute, and it just stays the way it is?
I think if you leave the section out, I don't believe that they're going to.
Say it again. Why is that?
If you take it out,
So the time that you establish this is when you become a city. Which is.
Also, you're saying city code may be in violation of state statute, that's what I'm going to say.
The city code currently says that there are not salaries.
But they can just establish the ordinance.
Okay, well, if they provide, if that's already in the code, we've got our savings statute in the charter, then yeah.
But we're not gonna say anything in the charter. We're just gonna leave it the way it is.
We're gonna leave the current city code rules.
And not
Which
include
says it can
anything
be
in the
done by
charter?
ordinance.
The city code is the city code, and we're not going to change it. Okay.
but this needs to stay in, this line needs to stay in there to where it says by city or, thereafter, future compensation adjustments must be ratified by the city
Right,
electorate.
so if we just take all of that out and don't mention pay at all, then they can create pay by ordinance, and they would change pay by ordinance, just like they do now. We just take it out and don't say anything.
Is that what you're suggesting?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Mr. Chairman, would you like to hear what the code is on it currently?
Yes.
If anybody wants to see this, it's what it's here for. Section 215, compensation. The compensation of elective officers of the city may be fixed from time to time by ordinance of council.
Okay, there you go. So we just stay,
So then we can basically
Eliminate that.
not have section 11 there in the charter?
well, the point that was brought up is a really good one, which is some folks who are gonna vote on this, you know, and I've heard the comments in the community that this is people trying to get themselves pay. So if you just don't mention all, they'd say, well, I guess that isn't why they were doing this.
If I may, I would echo what Ken has said. When I got my signatures, a lot of people thought that the whole purpose of this charter was so that council could get paid. So, and I don't think even if we say per city code in here, I don't think that's safe either. Like Chuck said, it's optics.
Suzanne?
I just want to play devil's advocate for a moment. So, if I may, they would be able to establish their pay by ordinance, and they could continue to grant themselves pay. And if they're on a staggered term, then there's a chance that they could give themselves some pretty significant raises without any sort of, unless there was a recall or something like that.
Or they got beat in the next election, just making it clear.
But it's by code though, right?
Right
So
now,
that
by
comes-
code, they could do that. They
Right,
could say, oh, we're gonna enact $100,000 pay raise for ourselves, and it's done, and then they could recall me, and
Yeah, but a code gets two readings.
the ordinance.
Goes in front of the people, I mean, yeah, the ordinance is the code, but still come before the people, and people could show up, that room could be packed. So,
I'm just playing devil's advocate. I think
Yeah.
it's fine to remove it, but
yeah,
just,
'cause it's been
So
going
does it,
on for-
does anybody have any other comment on that? I mean, as far as, does everybody think we should just remove that line? Let's have a hand vote on that. Does anybody think, should we remove that line?
Does anyone think we should?
Yeah, should we just remove the line,
Section 11.
section 11? Good. Does anybody think we need to keep it in there? All right, so then we'll just remove that line then.
I just want to repeat what somebody just said, which is by ordinance is the only way they can do it, and we're strengthening the ordinance provisions. We're making sure that the public see that. That's why I'm good with this on this and on taxes.
So that's
because
out. Good.
we encourage people to take parties to this.
Can somebody has their cell phone next to, one of the speakers?
Off the table.
Is there a speaker coming somewhere?
Okay, so then just keep it moving along, section 12, the B, including editing to broaden the advice against making change.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
you mind if I make one comment on this one?
yeah. Go ahead.
My concern here is the word moral turpitude. All the rest of it I'm good with. The reason I said moral turpitude is, for example, years ago, adultery was considered moral turpitude. I mean, would somebody try to do that now? Probably not. But would you want that ability to remove a council member because they had an affair? Would it happen again? It's probably worst case scenario. But I'd refer to also more on that than me as far as what moral turpitude means. But moral turpitude to me is pretty wide open of what it means. Certainly, to be a council member should be removed for fraud, stealing, et cetera. Anything of a criminal nature, they should be removed, no question, right? But moral turpitude to me is such a vague phrase. It's not just me.
So my counter argument to that is that it requires 5 people to vote. So 5 council members have to agree. So if you came in and said, I want to remove this council member because they are living with somebody and they're not married, and to me, you're not going to get 5 people to vote on that. So I'm just saying the moral turpitude is more limiting to say you can't come in and say, I want to vote this person out because their kid outscored my kid in the spelling bee. It's just saying what you can bring it to the table for. And so I'm okay with it.
There's unlawful conduct, so what moral turpitude is unlawful?
Well, I don't think, Matthew is trying to make this all about adultery, but adultery is unlawful, it's against the law. Because it's a state statute, we won't go there, so, so that's a great example. That would be unlawful.
So, then we don't need to do anything with that, section B, we'll just leave it the way it is?
Well, the question earlier at the previous meeting was, should we limit this to that? Should we say including but not limited to? And I thought the attorney had a good response, which is, if you make this too wide open, like any illegal act, then somebody can be brought before the council for running a red light. So you like these limits?
I don't think you should make it more broad.
Okay.
If you wanted to make it more narrow, I wouldn't have any objection to that. You can make it more broad if you want to. That's not my recommendation. I don't think you should.
Okay. So we do not want the language that says including but not limited to, it's just included.
No, that was a board member suggestion, not a
That was
council.
my suggestion.
But then he responded.
I think you could have some you could end up down the road in some very interesting constitutional litigation if the board voted somebody off for a speeding ticket or something. It'd be very interesting. Not a recommendation.
So then can we just leave it the way it is then?
So.
Yes.
Okay,
I say yes.
all right, we're good with that. We'll just keep moving forward then. Page 5. 13, 14 were pretty clean. Section 15, there was a couple of things in terms of some format, but the main discussion had to do regarding what was the difference between the two
The
positions?
difference between a person being declared an incapacitated person as defined by statute or determined medically or mentally incapacitated by a medical doctor. And a lot of people were concerned about what that means. You could just get some doctor to write a letter and then kick somebody out of being the mayor. Good discussion about that stuff, but I don't believe there was ever any really conclusion about, well, how do we as a group feel about this, or what do we as a group want to do about this, which exists in 2 places, right here and then right again in the next section with different numbers.
Where did this come from? Where did this language come from?
It's from Virginia, but if you could give me a second, I'll confirm that. How do you do that?
I would assume this as well. One comment I would make on that is that it's my understanding that it needs to say a psychiatrist instead of a psychologist. Now, tell me if I'm wrong here. My understanding, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor and a psychologist is not. So I think it needs to say a psychiatrist versus psychologist. I would also agree that it would need to be at least 2 letters. Because you would hope it would never happen, but what would happen if you have a doctor that hates the council right there and says they're crazy when they're really not? I think it should require 2 letters, and would recommend change to psychologist. And that would need to be changed in the other sections as well, not just this one, because that language carries over in multiple sections.
two different doctor consultations and psychiatrists, not psychologists.
So, I'm looking at Goodyear's right now, and it says, is convicted of, so, is convicted of intentionally violating any of the provisions of this charter or of a felony, or is judicially declared an incapacitated person as defined by statute, period. I did not see that other thing about a letter, so I don't know where that sentence comes from. It's not here. So-
Well, it's good to kind of rely on statute. Say, we have a statute out there that says this person is incapable of serving, and we just stop the sentence at that point.
Yes,
That's my preference.
yeah.
Yeah, just
I
by
want to avoid
statute.
a situation where you have a doctor
Yeah,
that's just, like,
Okay.
not having seen the mayor or whatever.
Right.
So then we can just leave it by statute, and then scratch,
Period.
and the mayor determined if be medically
Yeah.
or mentally incapacitated by medical doctor or psychiatrist, just not have that line in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
I like it. Any other discussion on that? Moving right along,
So that's the
Section-
same thing on the next page.
16, and that was the same kind of
Yeah.
discussion there. So then,
Council member versus mayor.
so felony or judicial,
Could have ended up in statute.
so then by statute and not put in there incapacitated persons defined by statute, and then,
Period, yeah.
yeah. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. You got that? Yeah, perfect. Just cruising right along. Section 21, failure to vote. What was it? Unexcused failure to vote to be entered as an affirmative?
I've never heard that. So you have council members, you say, we're taking a vote, and somebody says, I'm not gonna vote on this, and you say, well, then you're voting aye. That's what this says. I've never heard of that.
That's what it says.
Who does that?
Can't be. So a number of, cities don't do that. A number of cities don't do the opposite. You have to vote unless you have an actual conflict of interest, which you have to declare, right? So conflict of interest is defined by law, right? So it's you or a person that you're related to by the third degree, right? You have an actual financial interest in this, right? You have to declare what that is on the record, and then you have to abstain from voting. What some jurisdictions do, and some do this at the council, some do this on board, is they say, if you don't have a conflict, you're required to vote. And so not voting when you don't have a conflict counts as, in my experience, it's usually a negative vote. Joe Estes works in some jurisdictions where they treat it as an affirmative vote. Different jurisdictions do it differently. And so that's why this is flagged for you, is what do you think your jurisdiction should be? Do you think people should not be required to vote? I mean, it's up to you. You don't have to have this.
So I've heard the part about being required to vote. A lot of people do that. If you don't have a conflict, you have to vote. You don't, you're elected to vote. You have to vote. And then I've heard of penalties for not voting, right? Council members will be reprimanded by the rest of the council, sanctions and all that stuff, right? But I've never heard that we will count it as an affirmative vote if you choose not to vote.
Forgive me.
If that's common, then I just don't know.
Well,
Give me 1 second. What's the remedy then for, this feels as though, I don't know that it's punitive, but it certainly is trying to encourage a behavior. The behavior is
Right.
no unexcused
Right.
absences, right?
Right.
So I guess my question would be, what's the remedy for unexcused absences? And do we even have to cover that here, or leave it up to the council?
To that question, so that is one issue within the charter is about not attendance. This one is more about people refusing to vote. I used to have a counselor in another city, and anytime there was something he didn't like, he just wouldn't vote. Or he would go to the restroom when the vote was being taken, so he wouldn't be there. This makes it so they have to vote. And to Mr. Jones' question, comparison to the cities, for example, Avondale, abstention equals affirmative vote. No abstention is accepted a conflict of interest. You're welcome to read these, you may remember.
So it's common? That's all I want to know. It's common. Okay, I just never heard of it.
It's not universal, it is a common, at least you can find it in lots of places, enforcement mechanism for a rule that you have to vote.
So that's what I've seen, is that they make the enforcement strict enough that you always vote.
You want to,
Right? So there is a council ethics policy that says if you choose not to vote, you will be counted absent for that meeting, or something like that.
Yeah.
But if that also results in an affirmative vote, then I'm fine. I've just never heard of it.
Well, and this is flagged for you because you don't have to have this at all. You can get rid of section 21 if you want to, right? And the question is, do you want to have this kind of jurisdiction, this kind of rule of Litchfield Park? Some places have it, some places don't, and when they do have it, they vary.
What do Robert's Rules of Order say? So if they're just following Robert's Rules of Order, what does it say about somebody who doesn't vote?
In my experience, I have always believed that an unused vote was a negative vote. Joe, in his experience, has the opposite. Joe works in more rural jurisdictions. I work in more urban jurisdictions. I don't know if that's why, but we had a discussion about this the other day, and we used to list off a half dozen Arizona jurisdictions that do it one way or the other.
Do we have to have that, do we have to have it in there?
You don't have to have it in. In my experience, the reason that it counts as a negative vote is because you have someone who should be declaring a conflict of interest, but they don't. Instead, they just said, oh, well, you know, I don't have a conflict, but I'm gonna just abstain just for appearance. And now they've supported that item, right? And then they can say, no, I didn't vote. And so if you do it this way, then it gets voted down by so it discourages that behavior.
I think if we were gonna leave it in there, I'd rather have it say negative.
Yeah.
Would be a,
Well, it depends on what the question is.
Right. Well,
Voting in the affirmative or the negative.
What Robert's Rules of Order says is all motions should be in the affirmative. You should always be moving to approve something and then you vote it up or down.
Andrew, you got
But
any
again,
thoughts
you
on
don't have
that?
to have this at all. This is why this is flagged for the board.
What does your board currently do?
Yeah.
No, but everybody votes.
Everybody votes.
But you don't have a policy for unexcused
I am not aware of a current
I don't think
Litchfield Park policy on this.
So you can't abstain?
I believe we currently can.
And then if you don't get affirmative, it's not an affirmative or a negative.
I have not seen a vote, I have not seen this be critical. I have seen votes this year when many members have not voted and motions have failed for lack of.
You've seen many motions this
I
year?
have seen that happen this year when multiple
Here?
members in
Or-
Litchfield Park, where multiple members did not vote, and therefore the motion failed. So it does happen here. It's not a common thought.
So it doesn't get counted as a positive or a negative, it just doesn't get counted.
They can abstain.
That is what is currently the situation.
I don't like the idea that it's an automatic affirmative.
I don't like it to be automatic anything.
Right.
Figure out.
Yeah,
Yeah, just let the council
everybody
deal with that.
feel like we should just take it out?
Deal with it in the ethics policy.
All right, so we'll scratch that one then. So we're moving ahead, Article 3, into the city manager position.
And the comment here, I can't remember who made it, but somebody made a really good comment, which is, as long as the council's negotiating a contract with the city manager, why would we tie their hands and say it has to be indefinite? Let them figure out what the term is.
Right.
I think
Right.
we
Agreed.
Okay,
Yeah, leave it.
Agreed.
so that we can take that one out then?
Yeah.
Did you guys have a comment on
We
that?
take that,
Sure, city manager?
The city manager had a good comment of why he thought should have it, but, you know, they're negotiating, they can negotiate. If you want an indefinite contract and the council members don't want to give it to you, then be unsuccessful negotiations.
Mr. Chairman, you can certainly leave that up to the city council, it's certainly feasible. As I said, granted, I probably said this is self-serving, but a lot of cities put terms on contracts. And that's, as I said last time, that's a way of firing a city manager. Is rather than pay out their severance, they just let their contract expire and say, never mind, we're just not gonna renew your contract, so no severance for you, you're done. Or like for me, when I was negotiating my contract here, is that my contract doesn't have a term on it. And I think that's good personally. I like that it does an indefinite term.
Mhm.
That way, but again, that's totally, from my opinion, from my seat, you understand coming from that.
Well, it feels like you were confident enough to negotiate that, the next person better be able to do that as well.
So then
Long time from now.
are we looking at, then we like that, but we just want to have that line removed, shall be an indefinite term?
Yes.
Are we good on that? Is anybody, any other discussion or?
Maybe I have
We'll
a
move forward on
question.
that.
I have a
Okay,
question.
go ahead, Sue.
Matthew, let me ask you this question. So the indefinite term, let's say, when do you normally renegotiate your contract? Is it at the end of every year?
Yes, ma'am.
So let's say in December, he's up for a renegotiation and something comes up and they don't give him another contract. If he's I just feel like indefinite term, they would have to give him far notice if they're not going to renew his contract, yes? Because I don't think the
Susan,
indefinite term,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
My contract right now, it actually doesn't get renewed, it just exists, unless I end it or council does, my contract stays in place, because it is an indefinite term currently. Or if it was term limited, whenever the term was, if it was a 1 year, 2 year, 4 year contract, whatever it may be. But because mine does not have a term, it doesn't expire, again, unless I end the contract or the city does.
But it provides for
So-
annual negotiation.
For annual, yes, it does.
That's what it is.
Okay, so we don't need to we don't have to do anything then if you're already on an indefinite term.
That's
It
correct.
just,
So we're just saying strike that line.
And the council could give an indefinite term contract if
Yes,
they
they
Right.
choose.
for the next.
Right.
And that's up to him to
That isn't
negotiate.
prohibiting
that.
them from doing it.
okay.
We're just not, we're not mandating that they have to.
Good, so we'll go ahead and pull that.
Okay.
Done a pretty good job of not tying people's hands, I think.
Good.
Mhm.
Moving along here through city manager powers, duties. I think section 7, I think, Kenny, didn't you bring that up about emergency?
Yeah, so if you exercise your right for emergency, and it's above your normal spending limit where you actually need council approval, but you declare an emergency and say, I have to do this now, then you have to notify them. The only thing I don't see in here is that they have to approve it retroactively. So that might be a bad idea, because what if they say no and you've already spent the money? I mean, so what this says is, you have to inform them immediately, but you don't, I thought there was a state statute for procurement that said if you exceed your spending limit, that you have to get retroactive council approval for that expenditure, just so that it's not, so that the citizens are protected to say, well, the council ultimately approved it, they just didn't approve it before he spent it.
Well, I would tell you that it would have to be ratified or retroactively approved because you've already done it. And that's part of when a city manager makes a decision like that, that's the risk you're taking. It's what if council doesn't like it.
Right.
That gets you in real trouble.
Right.
You've got to decide what's best. As far as state statute, I offer it often, I don't know if it is or not.
So I think this is fine, but if state statute requires ratification or approval by the city council, then we need to add that language.
Well, I know you know a lot about procurement. I believe if you're referring to the state procurement code, that applies when the city doesn't have its own procurement code, which this city does. So I don't, if I'm thinking of the term that you're thinking of, I might not be. I don't believe it.
Okay, then this is fine the way it is, just as long as you're comfortable with
Okay, so
it.
you do not want it put on the agenda. He just thought, you want it left with, he will file a certificate.
Oh.
That's
So what the language currently says, and this is not a staff recommendation.
You
that's still
can't
another-
file a certificate with 7 council members without going to a council meeting. That's violation of open meeting law. So I think it has to go on a council agenda.
He can send it to them, they just have no ability to respond to it or talk to each other about it, right? He
Because
can
it's
send
not
it
gonna show up on a future
each of
agenda.
them as one item, one-way communication from the manager.
Okay, well,
But, right, I mean, this is not a staff recommendation, this is filler language from another.
I prefer that it goes to the council in the next meeting on the agenda. The city manager exercised his emergency power and spent this much money on this thing, that's an agenda item for no action.
That's for an amount over the manager's spending limit.
Right, you don't have to ever notify them if it's within your spending limit, but if it's over your spending limit, you have to tell them in a public meeting that you did it.
I don't know what you would.
Yeah, so we'll just add that last bit that he's talking about.
So what we would do is the highlighted language, I believe, if I understand right, would be replaced. Instead of him filing a certificate with the council, whatever that means, instead it would say, you know, the purchase shall be placed as an item on the next council agenda for their review and you know,
No
ratify
action,
it.
they can't do anything, right?
Well, I could ratify it, but yeah,
Yeah.
okay, but it'll be placed as an item on the next council.
For
agenda.
for ratification, yeah.
And then, well, that's the question, do we want to say for ratification, or we just say it's an item and then it's up to the city? The city can
Information
decide
only,
whether-
I think it's no action.
All right.
May I ask one more question, not to bring up the water thing again, but Kenny, do you want an item here where the city manager would provide a written report to council on, you know, the issues with water? Or what did you guys decide on that?
I think that's still in a work in progress, and we'll have that as a separate.
Yeah, I think if we decide
We'd
that
add
he
it
should
in here.
report annerly, oh, is it in here?
No, we would add it as like
Oh,
a
yeah, I think
9.
I think you're right, Susan, I think this would be the appropriate place to add that if we get to that, if everybody agrees that we should do that.
Can you just put that in a reserved in there and?
Reserve
and-
is nice.
Yeah,
That, good job for pointing that. I wasn't sure where that would go.
that would be reserved possible water. So moving through that, we're good with that line then, and that verbiage? Section 4, city manager and council meetings.
Where did we decide to put that? I'm sorry.
If we put it in there, it would go in under section 9 of the city. The city manager will provide
Where it
water,
already says.
yes,
Provide annual reports, okay.
yeah, and that would be under number 9, a reserve, but we're not quite adding that yet. And then going into the removal of the city manager, 180 days, I thought that Will brought up a good point on that. We talked about, he was at that, what was the standard in the
Yeah,
community?
you have to be careful of, I mean, positionally, if that's not the standard, you're putting your city manager at a big disadvantage. If the standard is 90 days and you're gonna hold him to 180, that puts him at a tremendous disadvantage as to what he'll be, his next position.
I think 90 days is probably adequate, if that,
Since the first one is, it's the other way around, this first one protects the city manager, so for 180 days, which the standard is 90. So I'm in favor of going back to 90 because that's the standard of the
Yeah.
other cities, you know, around us.
any other concern on that? Any other questions on that? Well, that'll be 90 then instead of that 180.
The next one, I think it was just that sentence, that little phrase that says, not subject to review by any court or agency, and I don't know how you could ever say that. The action of the city council is final, as if nobody could sue them for
Or appeal it.
acting inappropriately.
Right.
I don't think, did you have a comment on that?
Not an additional comment.
That was the interpretation of the city. I got that from other charters. I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember which one, but it came from other cities. My reason why is that because, just for me, it's hard for me to imagine the city manager suing the city for firing before it's political suicide. Any city you're applying for the future, that's gonna pop first thing.
Yeah, but if this is your last job and you're ready to retire and they fire you because you're just too damn old, and you say, I'm pretty sure that violates the code that you have that says you can't fire people for just getting old, and I'm gonna sue you for that. Oh, no, you can't take that to court. It says right here, you can't take that to court. You just can't say that. People can take people to court.
Maybe it's just taking out that second sentence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which would,
However the action.
yeah, however the action of the council shall be final.
I would say if you wanted to clarify that sentence, you could say, shall be final and not subject to appeal at the city level. There's nowhere to appeal this. Some cities have a board that's set up to appeal, and a employee who gets fired can appeal to that board. And what they usually say is, city manager doesn't get to appeal. This is final, and you cannot appeal.
We don't allow employees to.
Okay. So I would say final and not a.
Can we add that then?
Sure, final and not subject to repeal.
Yes.
Do we agree that sounds
Do we
good?
need
Yeah.
that line?
Yeah.
Do we need that line?
Not if nobody can appeal. Where does it say that nobody can appeal?
We just said that.
Yeah, they said that, but where does it say that? I've never heard of such.
In charter?
Oh, in the city employee
It's an
handbook or
employee
something?
manual that employees
Okay.
can't do.
Okay.
City
Well,
manager-
that may change at some point, so.
I would leave it in there.
Well, I mean, at some point,
Mhm.
employees gain strength and they go on strike and do all kinds of crazy things, right? And they may create a board where they can appeal terminations, but the city manager shall never be able to appeal it. So I think it's okay to put it in here.
Yep.
Even though right now there is no appeal process.
I'm not clear. What are we doing? What's happening?
Just changing this to say
You're
shall be
gonna-
final and not subject to appeal. If you want it to be more accurate.
I like it.
I mean,
Or you could have final period,
or you could just say it's final.
final.
That's fine.
I don't even think we need that sentence,
Mhm.
but okay.
They'll appeal it.
They'll appeal. They'll change the charter. There'll be a vote.
It's completely up to you, and I think, Member Jones is making some great points, I don't know, you can sue anybody over anything, right? And the court might say, oh, nope, you lose because of the charter, or they might not, I don't know. But, you know, I think Matthew's point is that he thinks he's recommending this to protect the city from getting sued by other city managers, not him, but later city managers who get fired by the council. I think that the council, it happens quite regularly.
So then do we have,
Whether this is necessary is completely up to you. I mean, city managers do
Does
get
it
fired
protect the city?
regularly. Yeah.
Then it does protect the city.
Compared to not having it?
Yeah, then we
Well,
should keep
because it
it.
says to somebody, you can't take us to court,
Yeah,
when in fact, you
keep it.
really can.
Well, and Board Member Jones's point is that, you know, we want this to be fair to the city manager too, and those are all good
Yeah.
points, and that's why you're elected to make these decisions, you know, what kind of rules do you want to put in?
What the
So-
charter
Who are you
city.
putting-
So can a higher court say, no, your charter may say this, but we're gonna allow this?
Of course.
Yeah.
That's like, maybe-
So the sentence is redundant then.
So that was my only comment on this earlier, was this just isn't true. You can write it all you want, it just isn't true. It's not, you can't defend it.
And so what is the, so what's the unofficial majority thinking about?
I thought we were gonna
what's
leave
in
it
our
as
next-
final and
Not subject to
not
appeal?
subject to
Is that where
appeal.
we're at?
Yes.
You get paid by the word or the hour or?
And then resignation of the city manager, minimum 60 days, and that was, that again came up, what was the standard in that field? Is that appropriate?
My contract is 60.
Mhm.
So some do 90, some do 60, I'm fine with either way. One thing I would tell you there is, I mean, 90 days is a long notice. I think 60 is pretty standard.
Yeah.
That's
Then
what I will be posting those.
I think we should stick with the standard on that of 60 days.
Quick question, do we need to include this paragraph? Because this is dealing with the removal of a city manager, and this is a resignation of a manager, which I feel like is a little bit different and could be handled within your contract, right?
Yes, ma'am, it could be.
Is it currently handled in your contract?
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
Yeah, why would we have the city?
yeah.
Right.
Just leave it however they,
Or with the contracts, yeah.
whatever the contract says, so we can just leave out that whole paragraph D, is
Yeah, it just ended at
That's my-
approved by the
Oh,
council.
I like that.
Then we don't have to put anything in there.
I get paid by the removal.
I like it.
Are we good with that then?
I'm kidding, I don't get paid at all.
You just,
Legal?
I'll get paid the same. Cut the four city attorney's salary.
Are you, that's fine?
Yeah, I've documented that we're taking it out.
Okay, and we're good with that?
We're taking out the entire D.
Yes.
Because if it's in this contract.
All right.
it's for sure.
Yeah.
Moving on to Article 4. There was a question about the title on the finance director.
Yeah, what'd you guys decide?
Well,
Associate, right?
what you've got right here, that's the magistrate,
Oh.
associate magistrate. So you've got right here is you've got city finance director in section 2, but if you read the actual text, it never actually says, you know, whose name shall be the city finance director. It just says, the city manager shall appoint an officer of the city who shall be responsible to the city manager. Right, it used to say who shall be called the finance director and who
Okay.
shall, so that's gone.
So, okay.
The section is still city finance director, so we wanted to flag that for you. I don't know what else to call it, it's just a section head. I don't
Yeah,
think
it's just
that
a section head, it's
requires
not an
that to be
official
their
title.
I think I just
You
leave it.
guys have solved that.
And then the other, so we wanted to draw your attention to it, make sure it's how you wanted it. I think there was a consensus last time to go ahead and do that. And then the other thing in this same paragraph is, it used to say that this person, who now doesn't have a title, shall receive and have custody of all the money of the city. And now it just says oversee, which I believe was also a board kind of.
It should say oversee the receipt and custody.
Yeah, oversee the receiving
Oversee
custody.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, oversee. How do you want that to,
Oversee the receipt and custody. Yeah. That doesn't change the
Yeah.
meaning of the sentence.
So not in your personal sense. Oh, thank
you
you.
have that? Are we good on that?
Yeah.
And then the other one was regarding the city attorney, and there was a member of our board that declared a conflict on that. I don't know if there was any other question on that.
You know, that was mostly, partly that's just a note, because I know it's important to one of our board members to have it noted, but, there were a lot of questions, there's a lot of discussion about how it works and who has authority over who, if everybody's reporting directly to the council, and then it just kind of ended. And so if anyone had a amendment or something that they wanted from that discussion, that would be a opportunity.
I have a question. How often is the contract negotiated between the council and the city attorney?
There's not a regular period of time.
We have been in contact with Gus Rosenfeld, I want to say since like 2006. We actually just changed that over the rate a few months ago, but other than that, the contract's been in place for a long time.
Yeah, well, I believe it, I believe even before Susan was at Gus Rosenfeld. So, yeah, I mean, it's been different firms, but the same kind of line of people for a long time.
Anything else on that?
No, not for me.
So we'll move to Article 5, appointed boards and commission.
Yeah.
I think the discussion there was whether 5 or 7, or what would happen if we didn't have enough,
I
or...
thought we had determined it is 7 now, and I thought everyone was comfortable with 7.
Somebody suggested a minimum of 5, so that they could still have 7, but if you couldn't get enough people to sign up, then you could have 5.
I suggested that.
Yeah.
I think that captures where we left it, is everybody
But
says,
does that
right,
also leave it at,
what
that
are we
they're only
on?
gonna,
So that we could have it where the 7,
well,
how were you thinking on that, Will?
I didn't, forgive me, I didn't have a wording, I just wanted to make sure that if you didn't have 7 people for the committee, that wouldn't stop you from putting the committee together. That's all I was trying to accomplish.
My interpretation of this was that everybody agreed, it says unless otherwise provided by law or ordinance, so the council can always change it, but we're setting a default number. Everybody thought 7 was a good number, but some people thought 5 was fine because you could still do 7, and there was never a conclusion of, okay, so what's the number that goes in the charter?
so if we don't say that 7 is the preferred number, I mean, then it could morph back to, we're only gonna, take 5 applications.
Sure.
I know.
Do we need to say a minimum?
For 7.
My suggestion was for 5 as a minimum. Frankly, I don't,
There's a minimum of 5 members.
I have zero personal motivation for this. All I'm trying to do is make it as flexible as possible for the board, the city board, the city council to get this, if they need a committee and they can't find 7 people, and we have defined it as you've got to get 7, and then the board isn't allowed to do that, you may be able to tell me that there are remedies to that, and I'm fine with 7. Again, I'm just trying to make it as flexible as I can for the council and the administrative team to get the job done.
Well, can we ask the question? I don't know. I've been here a long time, but I don't know. Terry might know better. Have we ever had where we didn't have 7 people that could fill a position?
I
We
don't
just
know
put
what it gets
a
the same
minimum
amount of
of 5?
applications for the vacancies. So there will be vacancies on the board.
Do we have some?
I don't think there is any currently.
Yeah, I didn't.
We've had one on RPG, Sunny, before.
So then can we put it, can we just word it as, 7 with a minimum of 5?
Or just
Would
minimum.
you put a minimum of 5?
Minimum of 5.
Mhm.
So each board and commission shall consist of at least 5 members?
Yes, a minimum
No.
of
I don't
5.
like that.
You need to.
At least,
A minimum of 5 members?
Yes.
So what keeps your
Unless-
board
so-
from being 11?
So what it currently says is unless otherwise provided, and so each board or commission shall consist of a minimum of 5 members, but the specific number for each board or commission may be set by the council, or may be provided by law or ordinance.
yeah,
Yeah,
Or we suggest, how about, or maximum of 7, no more than 7?
So
A
if you
minimum of
just
5 and
say
no more than 7.
no more than,
A minimum of 5, but no more.
shall
than
consist
7.
of between 5 and 7 members.
yes,
Yeah, that's
Good.
good.
That's clear.
I like that.
Mhm.
Are we good with that, guys?
Yeah, the other question
Five,
here was
seven, eight.
whether or not they should have, and it says state residency, but the question was city residency. Most boards and commissions in most cities, you require them to be city residents to be on the
Yeah.
board or commission, but we don't say anything about that. No?
Terry?
For normal boards and commissions, it is city residents, but when we were forming the youth council, we couldn't get kids. So the mayor agreed to allow it to go through the entire zip code, and then we got a few.
Right, but,
But that's the
so the
only,
question is, should we require city residency to be on our boards and commissions?
but it currently is that way.
It is what way?
That it is a requirement to be a city resident.
Okay, in
to be on
code.
board.
So do we want to put that in the charter? I mean, I think they should always be residents.
It's already in code.
If
But
it's
if-
in the code,
If it's in the code, let's just leave it.
Okay.
Okay.
But it brings up a question, what if we don't get 5? Now, is the commission dead in the water?
That happens a lot.
I
They-
know.
Committees can't meet because they can't get a quorum, because they can't, you know, and they can't get appointees, but, you know, that's a problem we have to resolve. Every city has to resolve. You have to get
Leave that
people,
Unless otherwise provided by, in this, shall consist of 5 to 7 members,
Until we
yeah,
get it.
unless otherwise provided in this article or by law or ordinance, period.
Yeah.
Because then
Yeah.
you could change it to 3, right?
That
Well,
gives council
so
flexibility
that they
there.
have the flexibility to change that.
yeah.
It also
Yeah.
puts the, not a burden, but the responsibility on the board members themselves to go recruit.
Yeah.
To actively
Hey, we have vacancies.
Right.
Council.
Mhm.
All right, we can leave it at that. And then and then as far as putting in, has to be a city resident?
no, they said just leave it out.
Okay, we'll leave it out. Anything else on that?
So are we leaving the whole paragraph, the remainder of the paragraph as is, with the exception of the 5 to 7 piece?
Yes.
Okay.
We good on that?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Article 6, finance taxation.
Oh, sorry, I think there were a couple of other. so
Yeah, you
that's
missed
in
C.
Article 5(1)B, we are now done with.
Okay, all right, yeah, Article 5, yeah, C.
Well, there's, sorry, no,
Now
The
you're on
board has not
C.
yet decided as to whether it should be in this section related to boards and committees.
and I'm sorry, I might have missed it. So the law or ordinance thing is being left alone in B, the other comment in B.
Yes, so
Yes.
Yes.
it shall be 5 to 7 members unless otherwise.
Unless divided by 1, okay. And so then C, yeah, so this is, it was specifically the part that said, so we're saying people are kicked off if they don't show up for their meeting. And then there's this sentence that says, this happens, you know, automatically. The board doesn't have to, you know, vote to kick them off, they're just kicked off. And there was a lot of discussion about this, and in the council section, there was seems like a consensus, take that out, that sentence. But then down here in the board, some people said, well, boards are lower, so maybe it's okay to have a stricter rule down here in boards than we have in council, and there wasn't an agreement on what should be done. It's exactly the same sentence that was in the council section that the group removed.
So can I ask, in the event that you were to remove this, but you had a board or several boards where you had consistently delinquent participants, is there other remedies to remove them?
Well, I think, so the only thing that's being removed is not the whole section, it's just the highlighted part. And so there would be, I think what would happen is the board would say, do we have to vote to kick this person off? And then they would consult the parliamentarian who would make a ruling. I would probably say, yeah, do that. And then they would vote to kick the person off.
So the question is, do they have to vote to kick them off, or they just automatically kicked off?
If you, yeah, I think that's the idea here.
Nowhere in here does it say unexcused absences. So if somebody has a death in the family and misses their third meeting,
Counter you're without a consent
You know,
of the board.
Without the
That's
consent
the
of the
idea.
board,
Let's say
yeah.
without
Oh,
the
it does?
consent of the
Consent, yeah.
where is that?
board. Duly recorded in the minutes.
Okay, good,
consent.
okay, good, okay. Then I'm okay with it being immediate.
Me too.
Yep, we can take it.
Mm-hmm.
Leave it in.
So what was that, leave it in or leave it out?
Leave it in means it's immediate, doesn't it?
Yeah, no vote necessary to kick them off.
Right.
Is that the consensus here?
This will be different than our council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the administrative team believes that's.
You think that's okay?
I think you need to take the politics out of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
then let's go ahead and we'll leave it then.
That's what we gotta ask, because I wouldn't consider that. That makes sense to me.
All right, now moving along. Article 6, Finance and Taxation. Moving on into page 12, Taxing Powers.
So, section 2 is adjusted from the last time you saw it. There are some things that seems like everybody agreed on. One of them was, what's now section B used to be part of the list. The A123 is now its own section. A123 was also just, the wording was just tweaked a little bit to make them all kind of match the same sentence structure so that it read better. But the big questions were, whether we should do more sweeping adjustments here, right? Whether A should just say, the council has the power to tax for any lawful municipal purpose here. That was one proposal that was floated around and discussed. And there were other proposals, other general kind of comments on whether this needs to be simplified, whether 2 should be a statement of general principle, and we should get into the nitty-gritty later in the article. And I don't believe there were any final decisions on those.
So parts 1, 2, and 3 are pretty specific, but the paragraph, or the semi-paragraph of A that's it's basically saying, anything that's not prohibited by federal or state constitution they're allowed to tax on. It's pretty broad.
I was in favor of the broadness because that was my,
I'm on board.
and I actually just wanted to not even get into TPT use tax. And that's all, we don't even need to say that because we've already said we can tax everything. And then use the ordinance process to do whatever they're gonna do, except for, I know that down there it says, property taxes.
Yeah. I don't mind this wording, but I'm also comfortable if you wanted to make it even broader. If you read through this far enough, it pretty much gives you, as long as it's lawful, you can impose those taxes.
And to the extent that it does get specific, it says including but not limited to, and then gets specific.
So
It's pretty broad.
to piggyback on what you said, so what are we trying to accomplish here? The first sentence, or the first paragraph, A, is saying they have taxing powers. So this could be as simple as, and I just wrote something a minute ago, the council shall have the power to levy and collect all taxes allowed by Constitution and Arizona Revised Statute, subject to limitations following. So it doesn't have to say, so for instance, you can use it to pay interest, or you can use it to pay, it just says they have taxing power. They are allowed to tax you for legal purposes, period, right? And then you get down to, the council also has the power to establish special taxing districts, which is a different subject. And that could be really simple, and this one is much more simple. Instead of saying what it could be used, well, this one is fine. Let's just say B is fine. So A, they have taxing power. B, they have the power to create special districts and tax them as well. And then in C, you get down to the things that are limiting what they can do, right? So, yeah, they can levy taxes, but for sales tax, they have, well, we already talked about this, whether we want to even put in here establishing the rates and things like that. They have the power to do that, so the council shall have the power to set transaction privilege tax and use tax rates through city ordinance, right? That's how they can tax you when it comes to sales tax. When it comes to property tax, no, the voters have to approve it, and then after that, the city council. I mean, that's just state law. So these are limits on their taxing power. I don't know. It seems to me like sections 2, 3, and 4 all belong in one section, and that one says this is a taxing power, and then this is the power to create districts, and then these are the limitations on your power. I get confused reading this whole thing is what I'm saying. I don't know what we're trying to say in 2. What are we trying to say? They can tax you and use it for these purposes, but not limited to those purposes.
Can I volunteer to redraft this part and resubmit it, or however? I don't know if I'm saying that
Are you
right.
talking about including section 3 and section 4 in that as well?
Yeah, I'm talking about fixing this because it does seem burdensome.
Chair?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, sorry, I'm not,
The other city, charters have that same language. I don't know why, but it would be consistent with the others.
I think part of the reason we left the section 4 property tax is we just wanted to make it very clear that it states they can't do that.
Well, sorry,
Without a vote.
we can just be clear on the numbers. I'm not, property tax, are you talking about is everything in section 2? Section 2A, section 2B,
Yeah.
or are we getting down into the?
We talked about 3 and 4 too.
Yeah.
They were talking about possibly writing it all together in one.
Including down to section 3, section 4.
so section 2, 3, and 4 would be kind of combined.
Yeah.
So but don't 1, 2, and 3 of section A just repeat what's said
Yeah,
Yes.
in the paragraph?
yeah, because they have taxing power for legal uses.
Right, so could we just leave the page, could it be just left at that?
Remove 1, 2, and 3?
The only hesitation I would have is if these other charters have it, and they've already passed all of that. And the legalese there and been approved by the governor, and they haven't been challenged. That would be my only recommendation.
I don't see a problem with it having duplication there on that.
So 1, 2, and 3 is meant to appease people and say, look, these are the kind of things we're gonna use. We're not going on vacations, we're not buying cruise
Right.
ships. These are
It's
the
not,
kind of
it's
things.
just
we
the
need.
transparency of it, right?
Examples, right?
Here's what my recommendation would be, is, I would recommend that you don't rewrite this and then pass it on the same night. If you wanna take a chance at hacking it up, that'd be fine. I would recommend you give us a meeting, we'll take it and have it reviewed. We'll have, we've got hack lawyers that can confirm with them, get it, and troubleshoot and let us give you some advice on it. Paige she has her contact that she can run it by. So I don't think there's anything wrong. Like I said, this is all scratch paper, including this article. Do whatever you want to it, but yeah, I think, to Paige's point, it's a good idea to run it by some people once we have a
It
product
needs
that
to
you
be
can
in
use.
there.
If I'm the only one that wants to do this and everyone else feels like this is sufficient, I don't want to create extra work for myself, but I will if you think it's worthwhile.
So I think it's all accurate, and I think it states what we're trying to do. It's just really wordy. But if everybody's okay and we want to leave it, the only thing that I think we have to decide is, in section 4 on property taxes, it says the voter shall approve the first property tax. That's clear, it's state statute, everybody knows that has to occur. But it doesn't address what happens to property taxes after that. And if we don't want to put that in there, what is the default by statute? That they get to change taxes by ordinance? And somebody, I can't remember if you brought up the issue of levies. Don't say tax rates, say tax levies. So if you added something to section 4, it would say tax levies in subsequent years shall be approved by city council via ordinance subject to statutory limitations. So that just clarifies that after the property tax is approved by the voters, the council will change the property tax levy after that. What's the state statute default?
It's limited to 2% per year plus new construction.
Right, but they don't have to go to the voters, is my point. They do it by ordinance.
Right.
That's the
They do
default.
have to have public hearings, it has to be noticed. and
Right,
certain
that's the ordinance.
But they put the
rules.
ordinance on the agenda that says, we've had the public hearings, and we are limited by the 2% in the primary property tax law, but they do it by ordinance anyway, so we don't have to put that in there. But if everybody's okay just leaving it silent and just saying, the voters have to approve the first property tax, with everybody in this room understanding that after that, the council could change it, right? That's just the way it is. And we don't want to say that, because then it implies that we're really looking for a property tax, right? We just don't want to say anything, and I'm
They could even
fine.
eliminate it, that
Yeah.
at some point they could.
Well, I'm fine with leaving it the way it is, I just think we have to have the discussion. Is everybody okay with that? Just leave it? Don't talk about how the levy changes after voters approve the first one?
As I was just
Do you,
rate
are you,
levy.
what is the city manager saying?
I like having language in here that it requires the election. I think it's good to show the public that it's in state statute already, but we need to show people that.
Correct.
I'm sure you guys know, there's already an element of the community that takes the reason charters being written is to establish a property tax. That is very obviously not true. I would tell you that for a city council, a property tax in this city is political suicide. unless you couldn't afford to pay police and fire. Okay? But I think it's very important to say that it does require election of voters, even though it's already statute, but just have it in there in the writing.
Yep.
If you're asking me as far as voter approval of future levies, is that what you're asking me?
No, we're saying, we would say council approves future levy changes, because that's the way it's going to be. That's what state statute. But we can just leave it silent, right? Just don't say,
So you would just
say
leave that out,
any property tax will be approved by voters for initially.
and that's all.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure we all,
Maybe does that work for you?
so.
So I'm not sure we need to rewrite that, section completely. Save you the time.
One thing that I wanted to bring up, though, on the property tax, it said, I think that we need to get rid of that, should the city ever intend to implement a property tax. I just think it should say, a property tax shall require an election of the voters to approve such property tax. Or an initial property tax shall require, but I don't,
Should, like, because it sounds like
Shall.
maybe they're going
Shall.
to.
Like, here we go, yeah.
So can we just,
Or something like,
Change-
shall the need arise for the city to implement a property tax?
That sounds foreboding as well.
you're ready to go.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, it's semantics, but probably cleaner just to say this is what
Can we
would be
just
required.
kind of change that a little bit, so it shouldn't say should, or if we need to, or,
Maybe just the instance
Or ever.
of property tax.
yeah.
one other thing on the sales tax, do we want to put in there that no emergency ordinance can raise taxes?
It says that later,
That's all.
under ordinances,
Yeah.
under ordinances.
Okay.
You can't do taxes.
Emergency, yeah,
All right. As long as you,
yeah.
Good question.
So on that sales tax component, then we removed the up to 5% line, or was that?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's from
That's just gone.
Gone.
So far, there's been 3 separate topics. One is the sort of global, 2, 3, 4, do we like the way they work together?
I think we're leaving it.
And we're moving on past that.
Yeah.
The other one is property tax, are we okay with what it says? We're good with the substance, we want to rewrite it a little bit.
Just the
Just
beginning,
not
just
should.
the beginning of
Maybe
the
more
sentence, just the
straightforward,
beginning.
Yes.
less literary. And then we're backing up to sales tax. Sales tax, we previously, seemed like a consensus, don't say that thing about the cap, so 5%, over 5% going to the voters, so that's gone.
Okay.
That last,
But there's a comment here, because there were a couple of other things that were mentioned. Some of them were things like no emergency measure to implement tax, which I believe is down later in the charter, but it was something that was
It's in the
raised.
ordinance section.
Yes.
People were throwing out other ideas, and it wasn't clear if the board was okay with this just as a one-sentence section, or if people still had ideas of other restrictions they wanted, other than a cap to send it to the voters. That, it seemed like was resolved, but were there other ideas or not?
Did you want to change the word rate to levy in section?
Well, yeah, that was part of the property tax discussion.
I would recommend.
Did everybody get a chance to look? All right, so
Approve the
we're-
proposed
All right, so we're
property
jumping, well, so first, sales tax. Did anybody have other restrictions on sales tax
No,
that they wanted considered, or is everyone okay?
You had
with
mentioned
one
about like a
sentence?
0.5 per
No.
year, and also we,
I said if we were to consider a
So,
limit, I would rather put that.
and then finance, what
But
would
it
you
should say
say on
tax
that?
rate, not tax. It should say
Leave it.
privilege and use tax rate.
Because our largest revenue source is sales tax, so to leave the council with the authority to make changes as needed if, we lose a revenue source, I think the way it is today is good for ordinance.
Perfect.
So then the question, you just mentioned the levy, so in section 4, should it say at the end, property tax and require voter approval of the proposed property tax levy?
So the discussion last time, mostly, remember Jones, you and Paige mostly were talking about a couple things, talking about the distinctions about what we're talking about here, and you did talk about, whether we wanted to put any limits on the council and how much they could increase it. Did we want to put any limits that were like time-based? Or, and then the other thing was, what did we want to actually limit? Did we want to limit their changes to the levy or the changes to the rate?
So your first question was about changing the rate of sales tax, and I think consensus.
That's done.
The consensus
Yeah, now
in the
we're done
room,
here.
okay. And then the property tax, I think all we're saying is, anytime there's a property tax, the voters have to approve the initial property tax levy.
Just, he's talking about root, instead of rate, tax levy.
So basically, what's the statute?
Right.
And then not adding any further restriction on the sales tax, just
Yeah.
the line that states
Right.
that they can be up.
That was easy.
Are we good with that? Section 2, 3, 4?
I have a question.
Yep. Okay.
On the levy versus the tax rate, and while we might understand that, I think proposing tax levy is gonna be confusing to people.
Could be.
And so I'm wondering if it could just be the state statute, whatever you mentioned before, but
That's a board decision. The statute does exist. It's up to you whether.
What it says is, the governing body shall submit a proposed amount to be raised by primary property taxes for approval of the voter.
So it says they have to, so I mean, what if you ended it at tax, approval of the proposed property tax?
Instead of, and then no rate, no levy, just property tax, yes. Is that,
What'd you say?
good, is that better, Game?
Or
Yeah.
proposed amount, which everybody understands,
Oh,
amount.
That's fine. Proposed property tax amount.
Proposed tax, property tax amount,
Mhm.
okay.
That's what's in statute.
Okay. Then there was a question about this, staff identify the current form of prescription. Is this an ordinance?
Yeah, the question was to the city staff, do we know how the council does this right now? We didn't last week. I'm thinking we may not now either. That comment may have to stay there.
Oh,
Yeah. I'm getting a feeling that we still don't know, so maybe the next comment will be better.
All right, so then we'll move through that one there and put a asterisk on that one. Moving on into section 6 on page 13C. Something about the language there.
I did do some research, and I think, I don't see this ever happening here. We do not have a lot of funds here. I think we could just scratch it. And there's also rules on the general fund loaning money too.
There's rules where, in statute.
So the rules that the city's general fund, like, can't loan with the square CFD, is that in the Constitution? Either in the Constitution or the gift law.
So you're saying section C doesn't need to be in there at all?
I don't think so. I also reached out to some of my colleagues who, they still have that in their charter. They felt like it should first to leave it, because it does say if that does happen, the money has to be returned.
I thought that was part of you brought that up, Kenny.
Yeah, so if you want to take, I don't think anywhere in the charter it mentions the city council has sole authority to change appropriations. So they create a budget, they publish the budget, everybody sees the budget, the public sees it. Only the council can move appropriations between one fund or one department and another. It doesn't say that anywhere here, but I don't think we need to say that either. This is kind of at that level of, you just know you can't do it.
Yeah,
Okay. So you want to take out C? I think that's fine.
I think it's.
Okay.
So what, do we have a consensus on that we need to take that out, or can that we do that legally there?
They can't do that?
I will, if you want to take it out, I will do a double check on it and report back to you next time.
So you're saying, because we don't have those funds, because there are cities, like Mesa, that collect huge water fees and give the money to the general fund, and then they don't have property tax. And we don't collect a property tax, but they have huge water fees and they give the money to the general fund. So that's That's legal.
Didn't we just discuss, like, last meeting of where the city gets their funds from?
Right, so because
So
we
that
don't,
just- that doesn't even-
because we
that
don't
doesn't
have
even-
those funds,
yeah,
you're saying
we
this
don't
is not
have those,
necessary.
right.
That makes sense, yeah, okay. Not because,
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but as a small city, we're only getting our taxes from a few small areas.
right, that's what I'm saying, is the reason it's not necessary is because we don't
So
have
then
those
we
funds.
can just check on that, if that legally, that.
And if you-
So the answer to the question of whether you have to have this in there is no, you don't have to have any,
Yeah,
none of them. But, you know, your question last time, I think, was what are the implications, right? What is this doing for the city, what is the city getting by leaving it or losing
Yeah.
it? And we can follow up further on that if you're looking for still more.
yeah.
Suzanne, what do you think on that?
I'm getting a little, like, slap happy, if I'm honest. Sorry, that's the reality.
Are you
of it.
making a recommendation for adjournment?
That might be.
You're running a little long in the tooth, so.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Well, how about if we finish up through this section 6? We only have a few more paragraphs here, and then we can end it at, we can take a break at, or
Adjourn.
article. Adjourn.
Take a 48-hour break.
Sure.
Go take a 48-hour break.
This next one might be a long discussion or a short one.
Which one?
The minimum
Section
reserve
8,
policy.
city minimum reserve policy. The last suggestion that was made, the last one to speak, I think, said, well, we could do something like, you know, council shall by ordinance establish a minimum reserve policy for the city.
Yeah, by ordinance, yeah.
That was you.
Yeah.
That was you, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the question was, do we want to put targets in here?
Yeah, we decided to make it, yeah.
I mean, do you want to say targeting some amount or some percentage? Because this is current city policy. Right, okay.
What do you think of that, Mr. City Manager?
As far as having the current numbers in there,
Yes.
I think they're good. That being said, they're very fiscally conservative, which is the way the city has always been. And for example, I will tell you, Paige, how many hours you think me and you spent beating up this policy together? A lot of time. I like it as written with the numbers in there, but again, it is very fiscally conservative. But I think it's good for the future. In my opinion, this policy prevents other cities from doing what I said about my hometown, where they spend the money in one time.
So the question that came up last time, which was really good, I remember Will commented on it, a couple of you commented on it, down at this end of the table, everybody was down there. If you say at all times shall have 25%, that means in an emergency, you can't spend that money. So why do you have 25% of the people's money sitting in a bank account if you can't spend it during an emergency? So what we said was, just pass a fiscal policy ordinance targeting some amounts, but knowing that if you have 25% in reserves, which should say like unreserved fund balance or something, that in an emergency, that's to be used to keep up city operations. You don't say, stop spending money, we're at 25%, because then you're just holding people's money, right? So,
certainly do that as well.
right, so that's how we want that worded, is to create a reserve policy by ordinance that targets those amounts, but doesn't say at all times shall maintain, right? That was the point you guys made.
Yeah.
Paige had drafted some language to try to address this.
It's just one sentence, but the council is required to adopt a fund balance policy that includes a targeted annual minimum unassigned fund balance of 25%.
Yeah, there you go.
Anybody like that?
But does that speak to the point that they can use it in the case of an
Yeah,
emergency?
yeah, it's
Yes.
a targeted fund balance policy reserve,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Gotcha.
Are we good on that language there?
If you could just rewrite the rest of this.
Good job.
That was quick.
So we're good with section 8 then with those changes that Paige proposed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Section 9, bond limitations.
I think this was the same thing. We said the city council shall establish a debt policy. Right, so they have to establish a debt policy. It's not just bonded debt, it's all debt, and it should be approved by ordinance.
And we wanted to know that 4 times, was there, I mean, did somebody just throw that up in there, or is there some sort of, metric that the cities are following? Is there some sort of precursor for this number? Did we check on that?
It started from our bond covenants, but the covenants are revenues, not expenditures. But I did do some research since the last meeting, isn't addressed in a lot of charters, but there are a lot of debt policies that I obtained from other cities. And one that I saw a few times was 20% of operating revenue, and that the debt repayment schedule cannot exceed 30 years. So our current debt right now is 9.4% of our operating revenue. I was trying to find a good balance between, you know, maybe the standard 20 and our current almost 10%, so maybe 15%. So if we had that 15% rule today, our debt payment could increase to just under 2.3 million, so kind of in the middle. The only thing on the debt limitation I would to throw out there is if the city someday did want to take over a private utility, it would require a considerable amount of debt. So I don't know if you want to put not including, you know, the purchase of a private utility, because that generates, you know, that will have a revenue that could pay the debt payment.
I mean, my understanding is not that we would be, this doesn't hinder the city from taking on a project like that. It's just suggesting that if they do, it's gotta be voted on, right?
That's true. If it went over the 15%, then
Yeah.
voters would.
So then
need to approve
that's-
that.
But it's
It's already-
still a specific amount of money if you look at the budget,
Yes.
right?
Yes, which I think is good if, you know, the council has the ability to issue debt up to 15% of operating revenue without going to.
I think it would be good for you in a council meeting and discussing all of these, because they need to recognize that all of those other cities that have those debt limits also have a secondary property tax that's guaranteed to pay those debts. You
Yeah.
don't. The fact that you're depending on sales tax, your limit has to be really low.
Yeah.
Because when the economy tanks, you don't get to collect the secondary property tax that's used only for paying those bonds. So even though other cities, I wouldn't go by the average of other cities, I would go by the average of other cities that don't have a property tax.
Well, they don't, so the improvement districts, CFDs, and special district debt are not included in that calculation because it is paid for by district property.
Right.
That's the other cities, which is the secondary, right, that you're talking about?
No, it's just the secondary property tax that the voters approved.
Oh, for
So when
the-
they
Kenny,
issue
what do you,
general
are you, Kenny, are you
obligations-
suggesting we make a
Yeah.
change, or what do you want to do with this, or how are we
I
gonna?
think we put in there that they have to develop an ordinance for a debt policy through ordinance, create a debt policy through ordinance.
Rather than what the policy is. in
Well,
here.
and the language that you read sounded good, targeting 25% unreserved fund balance. I like your language for debt policy.
That was the
That was
minimum
reserve.
reserve.
Oh, that was minimum reserve. Well,
And so, but you want something similar for
Yeah.
that policy, similar to the minimum
Yeah,
reserve.
yeah.
Okay,
So,
all right.
current is almost 10, so we wanted to just capture it right there. We
If-
can,
if-
we
yeah.
can just sustain that. no
if you
problem.
explain that to them, they'll develop a good ordinance, I'm sure.
So we're gonna go ahead and take a little hold on this right now, and I want to move to the next item on the agenda, establishment of structures of subcommittees. Do we,
No,
I think we're doing good.
I think we're doing great.
so then we would have to make, is somebody want to make a motion to take that off and eliminate that from the, agenda?
Do we
Yeah,
have to
I don't-
eliminate?
I don't think we need to do
I
that.
think
Do we need to do anything?
Didn't we table that or something? I
We-
thought we tabled
Yeah,
it.
we tabled it.
Just keep on table.
Are you moving to table it again?
No, I think we're doing
Well,
really
you
well as a
tabled it only
group.
until this meeting, you
I
have to
know.
table it again.
Yeah. I mean, do you guys want to vote
So
on it?
how do
or-
we, can we just,
You want
we would
to
have
table
to, so we have to make a motion to just take it off the agenda?
Oh, and then we'll table it.
Yeah, because if we make decisions, then it's off the
Okay.
agenda.
Yeah, so does somebody want to make a motion to
Yeah.
remove that item from future agendas?
Yeah, Ann Claire will make a motion to, remove that off the agenda, and that will not work in private groups. Is that right? I don't
Okay,
have that.
second.
It's a structure.
Okay, well,
It's-
so is there any further discussion on that?
I don't have that.
Willfully.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes to remove
I
that.
think we're doing good.
Last item on the agenda is approval of meeting schedule. Is there some discussion on that?
Sure, I have a
Oops.
little bit of discussion. DRB is holding their meeting in this room Thursday at 7 o'clock.
Oh.
Means we would have
We
to
gotta be outta here.
by 6 p.m. The
I see.
library is not available.
Okay.
They want banquet.
I think we can do it.
I I need my
Tuesday
video.
the twelfth, P and Z is being held in the library, so it would have to be held here. And then Thursday the fourteenth, RPG is in here at 7.
Could we have the library on Thursday, the 14th?
I believe so.
We haven't scheduled those yet, right?
Right.
My
So-
recommendation, I mean, ask everybody, Mr. Chairman, but I see a lot of people who are struggling to get here at 4 o'clock, and I don't work, so I don't care, or 4:30. But if you wanted to move these meetings, and I know it's a burden on staff, but if these meetings started from 6 to 8, I don't know what you all want to do. I just want to make it easy on
I
everybody.
think we don't have to go that late. I think we could go.
The 4:37 is good, we just need to hustle.
I'll just hustle, yeah.
Can I ask,
I've blocked out my schedule, so.
Okay.
I'd like to ask the board a question. If, as we approach the holidays, is it possible for people to have flexibility and maybe meet on Monday and Wednesday next week, possibly the week after, or do you want to stick to only Tuesday, Thursday?
Why don't we think about it and discuss it on Thursday?
Yeah, we
Okay.
have a Thursday meeting.
So we have, where's our
Thursday
Thursday
meeting
meeting
here,
gonna be though?
Where's our,
It'll have to be in here, but you have to be out of here by 6 o'clock.
The majority of the time setting our meeting schedule.
So we gotta hustle.
So it's be 4:30 to 6, Thursday?
Yes.
I didn't know what.
4:30 to 6, and then we'll leave it at that, and then we'll, everybody needs
I know, I
to think
saw
about
you,
the next meeting. I do think we can get this wrapped up, and one other point. When we vote to approve it, it's approval as a draft. We're gonna vote to approve it as a draft. It'll go back to legal, they'll look at it. We will have then the opportunity for a final vote. It's not gonna be our last,
Okay.
time to vote on it. So it's it'll be a draft, to let it go back to them, and then we'll have the final vote on it. And that final vote, we'll have some time, we can, that can go back into January, after the legal is done with it?
So we're taking notes on what you're saying right now, Chair, to make sure that you've got the right motions and things on the agenda. That's certainly right. I mean, once you adopt a proposed charter, right, then you're done. And so just be careful you don't do that until you're ready, right? But our math, looking at, and again, it's such a puzzle with all the different statutes. We think that, and working with the publishers, we think that your drop dead date would be about January 16th.
Yep.
Where you have to have had that vote so that this thing can get run in the newspaper.
So you want to reconvene after legal review if there's any changes?
Yeah. So back to our, on this agenda, approval of meeting schedule. Is there a motion to,
Can
Before we go
we
to,
just clarify, like, what we've done tonight, what we're gonna be expected to do on Thursday? So is legal going to incorporate our changes tonight on the sections 1 through whatever we did, and then resend it out? Or are we just gonna continue working through and then hopefully get another draft? Like, I think we need to set those expectations so we know what to do.
I think we need to finish where we're at, get it back to legal to edit the changes that
Edit
we've
it all at
done.
once, or redraft it all.
That can come back out,
One document.
and then we can sit down and vote on a approval of the draft to go back to legal, not a final approval of the charter.
Okay.
So
You
back
comment
to
on the
the
meeting time?
agenda, for approval of the meeting schedule, is there a recommendation to table that until next meeting?
I would just like to make a general comment. 4:30 is really hard for me to get to. I work a 9 to 5 job, so I'm leaving work early every Tuesday and Thursday, which is why I haven't been here sometimes. So I'm not going to make the schedule move for everybody else, but it is a burden on me and probably some other folks that.
What would work better for you?
I mean, I've got 3 little kids that are 8, 6, and 4, so my preference is after they go to bed, but that doesn't work for everybody else.
At your house? At your house?
But, 4:30 is fine, but just the flexibility for those of us that can't do it.
That's understandable.
Is there a problem if they're coming in late and they're part of, yeah?
Yeah, you're fine.
No, you're good.
Just come
No,
late.
you're good.
Just make sure you have an excused absence. So back to approval of the meeting schedule.
So what is our meeting, just to make sure we're.
Well, we have a meeting scheduled for this Thursday at 4:30, and it'll end at 6, here in this meeting. This was to discuss a schedule for the following week. There was somebody mentioned maybe let's give us a chance to think about it, look at our schedules, and then we will
You'll table it from next.
Table, we would have to table this until next meeting.
Tuesday, I will be on my way to Atlanta, so
But Thursday, we're talking about tabling it till this Thursday's meeting,
okay.
and then discuss what our next meeting schedule will be.
Mhm.
So is there a motion to table this?
A motion to table.
I'll make a,
Second?
sorry, I'll make a motion to table the agenda item on the schedule for next Thursday.
All right, then, anybody want to second that?
Second that.
See that, is there any other discussion? So all those in favor of tabling that, approval of the meeting schedule?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Anybody want to make a motion for an adjournment?
So moved. Second.
Second, so, any other discussion? All those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes to adjourn.
Good job, guys. We're still motoring pretty good.